Right. Welcome, everybody. For the record, I'm John Laria, Chair of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. Welcome to the May 3rd, 2024 meeting. Thank you for being here. We have commissioners in the room. We have a few commissioners on screen. I see we have others who are also zoomed in. So thank you very much for joining us. Don, is there anything that we need to know just purely administratively before we get started? Housekeeping? I don't think so. Okay. I think we're going to, I'm going to skip the introductions. I think we've been introduced enough at this point, and someone can take care of attendance, so we can skip going around if that's okay. I'm not yet. Right. So the first item of business, which is an important one, is the election of a commission vice chair. The statute, our governing statute, requires the commission to elect from its own members, both the chair and the vice chair. As you know, I asked the staff to send an email out asking for potential nominations. Apparently, one nomination was received and received multiple times for DeAndrea Walker. The commission was advised of that. So I'm hopefully confident there will not be any motions to the contrary or floor fight or anything else today, but I just want to say a quick word about DeAndrea for people who may not know her as well as I do, or for people who might be watching and who really don't know her yet at all. I think she's been in the news, if you will, recently because she was recently nominated by the Baltimore County Executive, Johnny Olszewski, to be the County Administrative Officer, the CAO in Baltimore County, an extremely big and important and demanding job. She was unanimously approved by the county council to that job. And of course, she's responsible for the day-to-day operations of county government, as we all sort of know what the CAO is about. You may also, you may be less aware that prior to her appointment as CAO, she served in a variety of executive roles at both the local and state levels. She was Director of Public Works and Transportation in Baltimore County, a similar role in Prince George's. She was Deputy Administrator and CAO at both MTA and MVA, and served as Deputy Secretary for DGS. That is really quite a resume and fulfills what I had hoped for. I mean, I was happy that she was nominated because it fulfills what I had hoped for just in the general structure, which was to find a vice chair who sort of was from the other categories than me, right? You know, private sector, Baltimore City, I guess those are two of the big ones. I was hoping we would have someone not from the city, and also ideally someone from the public side. We couldn't really have a better option than DeAndrea because she meets those two criteria, as well as, you know, the 6 or 7 bonus items, which is her extraordinary experience in this subject matter. So I'm very, very.
And there's always that attorney thing.
Right, there's that too. Not an attorney.
Right.
Really very happy for the nomination. And what I'm going to ask now is for a commissioner, please, to make that nomination, and I'll ask for a second.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Spencer. Many seconds, Marcus. Opportunity for any discussion or further comments or debate from the commission. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. DeAndrea, congratulations, and more importantly, thank you, because you have a lot to do in Baltimore County and other places. So Baltimore County is integral to what we're doing here, along with your sister counties in the city, but it's really, really great to have you in this role. And I'll give you a couple of minutes if you have anything you want to say upon assuming this office. Please go right ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much. And thank you, commission members, for your vote of confidence as the vice chair. I'm honored to have been nominated and to be voted as vice chair. And I will tell you all from a personal point of privilege, as a part of my conversation with the county executive when I was considering taking the job for CAO, we did have a conversation about this commission in particular, because as you all know, moving into that position, a lot of things I have to let go. And I asked, and he suggested that we still play a vital role in BTRC because of the importance to the region. So I thank him for his flexibility, for allowing me to continue on this commission, and understanding the importance of transportation for the region and the importance that Baltimore County plays in it. And I thank you all for your vote of confidence as the vice chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Great, look, that's terrific, excellent. Okay, let's move on to significant presentations from MTA. First, the administrative update to be followed by the once deferred major project briefing. I promise that we won't defer it again, Fred. So let's move on to that. I know we've got slides, and I believe, and we've asked for this sort of going forward. You do have copies of these slides in your packet so that you can follow along, so you can make notes and you're not just relying on what you see on the screen. Try not to read ahead to ruin any surprises, but I'll turn it over, if I might, to Administrator Arnold. Holly, are you?
There were few changes made, so we're.
Yeah, the version that you have is prior draft, so
Would you like us to give them back in exchange for something, or how do you want to handle that?
is what got sent out yesterday the incorrect draft or the correct draft?
The ones printed are previous draft, not from yesterday, it was from Wednesday.
Okay. What got sent out?
In the email.
Yes. That the
That's
correct
what's
draft?
printed.
Okay, then no.
So what's your preference, just so I know?
So you can look at it, there's some updates, so you'll definitely just see an earlier draft.
Okay, but the email that was sent, are you saying that the email that was sent out? We didn't send these slides out, correct, Don?
They were sent out as part of the package.
I think I asked
They
you.
were not sent out.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked for them not to be sent out because frankly, I wanted you to be able to present them fresh. I did ask for.
But what is copied is a prior draft.
I understand, I'm just clarifying, sorry, not to beat it to death.
We'll get you a.
Right. But just so everybody knows, just a matter of, so what I'm trying to figure out what to send in advance and what not, because, just to be practical about it. I just thought that sending the MTA slides in advance is kind of too much, that it's better to sort of see them, listen to Holly and follow along. So that's why you have really everything else but that. You will get by email, copy of the correct slides later today. Sorry, thank you, Holly, go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it has been a very active couple months since we last met. I do want to just give a shout out. So there was a few of us who just got back from the American Public Transportation Association Mobility Conference in Portland. We all got back Wednesday. And we had an MTA team that was competing in the International Bus Rodeo. So it's the first time that they had held the rodeo since 2019, so 5 years. So we had a maintenance team and an operator who competed. We weren't able to take home the trophy, but they all did very well. And I'm very proud of the team for going out and putting themselves out there, because that is a big challenge. So just want to acknowledge that team publicly, that they did a great job. So diving in. There we go. So I want to highlight, we've been very successful with a number of grants over the past couple of months. So I'm going to start, we won a transit-oriented development grant for the Red Line from the Federal Transit Administration. So we're going to have $550,000 in funding to create a TOD implementation plan for the West Baltimore Red Line station. Because of our existing West Baltimore MARC station, the new Frederick Douglass Tunnel and the Red Line, there's a lot of activity happening around the West Baltimore MARC station. And we think there's a huge opportunity there for TOD, looking at different financing mechanisms, strategies for mixed income and affordable housing. And so that's what this effort is going to be doing. We're working with the TOD manager at MDOT, and so it'll be a combined effort there.
Before you go to the second slide, if I may, I just as a maybe putting a pin in it kind of thing, there is just an incredible amount of TOD activity going on, the Moore Miller administration at MDOT, at MTA. I think people know that there were two RFPs that were issued jointly by MDOT and by the Maryland, by Medco, which was a nice partnership to begin with, and then they looking at TOD opportunities along the MARC line, looking at TOD opportunities at the transit stops in Baltimore City. I have it in mind to get the commission engaged in that, up to speed on that, and we'll have a proper presentation about that once those studies kind of presented, and so it'll all come together, but TOD is enormously important, for all of its economic benefits, including frankly, ultimately the potential revenue it might create for the system. So we'll look forward to doing that. My only question for you, Holly, is this TOD work integrated with, I guess what I think of MDOT's TOD, the David Zayden
Yep, I just
shop?
said the
guys.
TOD manager from MDOT is gonna be who we're coordinating with on that.
Gotcha,
So yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
great, thanks.
We were also successful in winning a US DOT SMART grant. So we got just shy of $1.3 million in federal funds for transit signal priority. So it's gonna be cloud-based, state-of-the-art technology. It'll help us reduce our maintenance cost and basically improve green light predictions for our transit vehicles. So we're gonna be installing those at 90 intersections on 4 high-frequency bus corridors. You can see them listed here. We're coordinating pretty closely with Baltimore City DOT and Baltimore City IT. And we're really looking to improve on-time performance, reliability, and travel times because it does reduce the times that buses are waiting at traffic signals. We also were successful, and again, a huge thanks to our federal delegation of receiving $5 million in federally designated spending, earmark funding, towards supporting a new pedestrian connection between Cherry Hill and the Patapsco Light Rail Station. If you're familiar with that area, you'll know that a lot of people, it's hard to get to the Patapsco station from Cherry Hill. And so a lot of people unfortunately do choose to walk along the light rail tracks, which is incredibly dangerous. Encourage folks not to do that, but we don't have better options right now. And so this grant will be critical to advancing that project to full funding. The overall cost looks about $15 million, but we see it as a huge safety project. It will improve bicycle and pedestrian access and really expanding like the trail network in that area as well. So similarly, we are coordinating closely with Baltimore City DOT. They have complete streets plans for Patapsco Avenue and the Patapsco Regional Greenway Phase 3 segment that DMC is working on. So a lot of effort in that area, and I think this will be a critical link towards that. MTA was also recognized by the Federal Transit Administration for their Healthy Climate program, and we were known as a champion of the challenge. So we were awarded this on Earth Day. There'll be an actual award ceremony in this fall, basically looking at our climate action plan and how it works towards the goals that the Federal Transit Administration has in their Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet climate challenge. So very proud of that. There were only 3 transit agencies that were awarded that recognition, and being one of those is a big deal. Speaking of Earth Day, we did provide free transit on all of our modes on Earth Day, just in recognition of the fact that transit is a very climate-friendly way to travel. We also unveiled 2 of our buses that were wrapped in original artwork by 6 young Maryland artists. So we did a competition. People were able to submit their artwork. Judges from local organizations and determined that these were the 6 winners. The buses look fantastic. I encourage you to see them out there. And they'll be kind of traveling around the region for the next several months. We also launched our Youth Transit Council. So we had in-person meetings in March and April with this group. It is a very engaged group of young people who are excited about the transit system, want to make it better, want to give their feedback. We've had a couple of really kind of in-depth meetings so far, active with lots of activities for the students to do. I went and spoke with them at the March 23rd meeting. I'm really excited to see what comes out of this group. I think some of the feedback that we get from young people is obviously their experience on the transit system is different than our experience on the transit system. And so that feedback will be critical as we look to focus on rider experience and how we can better improve our projects going forward. Service-wise, so I did want to highlight some recent service improvements. I mentioned this last time that we did a service change back in February, really looking at improving reliability. And so our core bus service cuts have fallen from 12.2% in January to an average of 5.3% in April. So that is a multi-year low. Still too high. We want it under 1%, but I do want to celebrate the progress that has been made. We've really been focused on hiring and training operators, getting new people in the door. And again, the schedule is being built to better accommodate some of those operators in their schedules. On-time performance did go up from 71% in January to 74%.
Question, what contributed to your core bus service cuts falling in a 4-month period by that much?
hiring and training. So we've been having a huge effort to hire and train and onboard more people. So kind of last summer, we really started hiring and we did training every 3 weeks. So we kind of doubled up the amount of training that we do. It takes about 3 months to get through that training program. And so we're kind of now actually seeing the results of getting more people through, getting a new class of 25 people every month, and having more operators available. On the service side, we also completed our commuter bus hearings. So if you remember, we announced in December that we were initially planning to eliminate commuter bus service as part of the overall budget cuts that were going to have to happen. The governor made it available in January, 150 million, of which part of which was going towards commuter bus. So there's still some reduction, about 40%. Is what we're proposing right now to retain. We held hearings, very active, engaged public, and got over 800 comments. So we're now kind of digesting those, and we're going to put out our proposed kind of final plan later in May. And then on our service changes, so we do service changes 3 times a year. The fall is typically the biggest one. So for our fall 2024 service change, we announced the proposal on April 30th. The full draft is available on our website. We'll be holding public comment through July 8th. We're holding 2 public hearings, June 5th and 6th. Not a ton of changes this time around. We're just kind of making permanent some of the things that have been pilot previously. So our Quick Link 40 and the Local Link 73, which is again that kind of quicker service, and then service to job centers are proposed to be made permanent. Making an extension of the Local Link 85 to North Avenue Light Rail Station to again have that better kind of bus rail connections. And then again, looking at route operations and pedestrian safety as part of the proposal. And that will go into effect with our fall service change that starts when school starts, the Sunday before school starts on August 25th. So I want to dive a little bit more into some of the numbers. So I mentioned, again, the improvement that we've seen since January in service delivery. So service delivery is kind of the inverse of cut service. So I'm going to start on our bus side. So service delivery, again, we're up to just shy of 95% average in March. And at 95% in April. So again, so good improvements there. We're not where we need to be at. Our goal is less than 1% of cuts or 99% of service delivered, but I think I just want to again celebrate the progress that we've had. On-time performance, again, kind of slow and steady increases. Our goal is 80%, so we're not quite there, but hitting that 75% mark is a big effort for the agency. And then real-time availability, similarly, we've been adding extra antennas on our buses so that if one antenna goes out, another one is still able to work. Because the real time is something we hear a lot from riders, is they want to be able to use the app on their phone, they don't want it to show up, and making sure that that does happen. And so that's a big focus as well.
Just real quick on the bus service, have you noticed any kind of changes in kind of ridership requests or concerns regarding communities in South Baltimore trying to get east as a result of the bridge?
So we've been monitoring ridership on the routes that are most affected by the bridge. We've seen it's kind of, there's no real trend that we're really seeing. There's just kind of highs and lows that are varying. We are seeing in particular with the 63 and the 163, their on-time performance has really dipped, mostly just because the extra traffic that we're seeing over in that area.
Okay. Thank you.
On our light rail side, so obviously the data here is a little skewed based on what happened in December. That said, service delivery, we were at 100% prior to December. We're now kind of edging back up towards that 100% level, so continuing to make sure that we're delivering the service that we say we're going to. On-time performance, similarly, I think a good news story here, holding fairly steady at 95-96%, continuing to really focus on that with our operators. Vehicles continue to be a problem for us. We have a lot of parts availability issues. We've had a number of body damage due to prior crashes, and so those vehicles are unavailable. So the team is working really closely with our vendors and suppliers to ensure that we can get those parts to kind of keep that on-time performance and service delivery where it needs to be. On the real-time side, real-time on our light rail vehicles is kind of hit or miss. Some of the vehicles it works really well, some it doesn't. So similar to the bus side, we're looking at adding extra antennas to them to help with that kind of redundancy, just in case one of the antennas goes out. On our Metro side, so Metro, we are struggling with service delivery. see the chart here, the percentage is going in the wrong direction. Metro is our oldest, not our oldest mode, but the vehicles are the oldest, they're 40 years old, and we are dealing quite a bit with the impacts of aging infrastructure. So vehicle availability is a big issue. We've been working with our vendors and suppliers to make sure that we're having the parts that we need. You know, traction motors is an issue that we're working through right now. But we are looking at kind of different ways of how do we do the maintenance and how do we bring in some extra quality control to make sure that we get the vehicles out there. Similarly, on-time performance, kind of all over the board due to, again, vehicle availability, and we've had a lot of mechanical issues with the vehicles, so when they break down, that impacts on-time performance. We've also really been focused on improving the wayside infrastructure, so the tracks with our third rail cover board, things like that, and we do more single tracking, which has an impact on our on-time performance as well. That said, I do want to celebrate real-time availability. We have hit pretty consistently 100% real-time availability the past couple of months, so you will know where your train is, even if it's maybe a little bit delayed. Yes.
I had just a clarification. So the challenge in age is both in vehicles and in track and infrastructure?
It's both. It's primarily vehicles right now, but the infrastructure, I mean, similarly, it's 40 years old, and so there's a lot of work we need to do. On our Mark side, again, I think a good news story here, 100% service delivery has been kind of edging up, it was above 98%, but we did hit that in March. On-time performance continues to increase as well, we're about 94%, and our real-time availability, we did have a dip back in December, but has really regained very well and continues to get towards 100%.
Let me just ask you, I'm sorry, let me just go back to Metro. So you're trying to get parts, but are you ordering new vehicles?
Yes.
And they're just not,
So the
when are they coming in?
vehicles are, so the first 3 Mary pairs are on site and they're on the test track right now. We have a lot of testing that has to be done, both on the test track and then on the main line. So they'll do it first in off revenue hours, then during potentially on revenue and some single tracking. We're looking for potentially the first set to go into service next summer. So we're still, you know, a year out from the first set of vehicles going into service. And then again, each one will kind of follow after that. So we're still looking at keeping these legacy vehicles for at least a couple years.
so they come in and it takes a year before you can actually put them into service?
The testing that we have to do, yes. So I mean, it's about 18 months of testing. They came in, the first 6 came in back in September. We do not have to do that same level of testing on every single set that comes in. Once we kind of go through the first one, there's a lot of validation that you do with that particular set. There is still testing with each of the ones that comes in, and there's like a burn-in period as well. They have to go, it's 1,000 miles, the wrong number here, but in service to actually, before we get through that kind of like acceptance phase.
So it takes you from the time of order built to the time that they hit service is
I
3 years?
believe these were ordered in 2016, 17.
2017, 7 years?
Is that the average? I mean, the industry average? I mean,
So ordering rail cars, I mean, and Fred will get into this a little bit with the schedule. I mean, it's a long process. So the procurement is about a year. Then once you do issue procurement, it's not an off the shelf, like they don't exist somewhere. So we can just go buy one and bring it here. They have to go through design as part of that. Then they build them. There's Hitachi also kind of changed where they were building them. They were building them first in Miami, then they built the plant in Hagerstown, which is great, Maryland business. But that also added some time to it. And then, yeah, they do have to come in and be tested. We also, because we're replacing the signal system, it's a little bit more complicated even. So it's one contract for both. And so there's the design for the vehicles and also the design for the signal system. So all of that has to be tied together.
So you had 6 come in. How many cars do you have?
We've ordered 78.
You've ordered 70,
78.
78.
I think we're looking, again, I'm stealing Fred's thunder here. 2027 is when they are scheduled to finally all arrive, 28, somewhere in there.
They're not all arriving, they're staggered.
They're staggered, yeah.
78 are staggered over
Correct.
years to come in because
Yeah, so
it
like
takes 18
between-
months to test.
Between, so we got the first 6 in, they're going through testing now, they'll start testing on the main line. As we start to bring them into revenue service, we'll bring in a pair, you know, set of 6, test them. retire a 6 and then bring them into service. Yep.
Newer vehicles reveal more issues on the actual infrastructure, the track and wayside.
So as we're out there doing some of the, like the signal system installs and whatnot, in some cases, yes. I mean, we do have maintenance away track workers, track inspectors who are out there multiple times a week. And so tend to find things, but yes, while they're out there doing extra work, they may discover something that, you know, kind of pops up as they're installing it. I talked about Merck. Commuter bus, again, service delivery, inching close to that 100% mark. We have kind of fallen off a little bit in March and April, as the commuter bus contractors have had this uncertainty about what's gonna happen with service come July. They've lost some operators, so we're working with them to try and, you know, maintain that service level as much as possible. But we do understand the uncertainty they're dealing with, so as quickly as we can to let them know the final decisions, that should help just stabilize the service there.
Can you just to establish for everybody, including others who are listening, you just quickly go through those 3 categories. What does service delivery mean? What, just quickly summarize those for us?
So service, how much service we actually put out compared to what is scheduled.
But how is that measured? Like service on up, numbers of
So we
vehicles?
scheduled 100 trips to go out, 99 trips went out, that we delivered 99% of service.
So the measuring stick is trips.
I mean, it's more complicated than that because of like a partial trip goes out, it counts, so but essentially, yes.
Okay, all right, and then
Yep, on-time performance, again, did we show up on time compared to the schedule?
it is on.
On time, there's a -2 + 7.
Right. -2 + 7. And real-time availability, sorry,
Is the real time available on that trip?
I'm sorry, meaning,
So like, is there real time available on the trip? Is the bus tracking, is the train tracking, or is it just not tracking and it shows up anyways?
Is it tracking on the app to say that it's supposed to be at
Yes.
Charles and something at 3 o'clock? Is it tracking on the app at that time when I pull up the app to say that it's right where the schedule says it's gonna be, right?
So you want that number to be higher, so real time availability, we'd like it to be 100%. Service delivery, similarly, we want it to be higher, I mean, all of these, we want them to be higher is better here. See, an upward trend is what we're going for.
what is a reasonable industry standard, best practice, whatever you wanna call it, aspiration for each of these? You know, because obviously, it'd be great if we were the best in the country or better than everybody, but what's really the practical goal?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the core bus, so our service delivery goal, we would like to deliver 99+% of service is the goal, right?
Uh-huh.
Things happen, but getting above 99% is the goal. On-time performance, our goal, it depends on the mode, but core bus, it's a 80% goal. Right now, we're not there yet, but once we hit 80, we'd like to bump it up to 85. And then real-time availability, again, the goal is 99.
And are those, I mean, 99 is 99, but are those the goals that typically a transit agency is shooting for? Like, for example, the second one, 80, 85, that's not 100%. And obviously, maybe 100's infeasible, 99's infeasible. So is that goal based upon what you would want to get to based upon best practices?
So there is no real industry standard on this. People measure them in different ways. Real-time availability, for example, or the real-time kind of tracking, there's a group that just put out a new benchmark in the way that they're showing that. And so we're participating in that. We've changed our benchmark to align with how they're tracking. We're part of a couple different groups that look at these things. Again, different agencies have different goals. The 80% goal for bus is what was established in the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, which again, this group is supposed to be approving, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And then once we hit 80%, the goal is bumping up to 85.
Are these American standards or these international standards we're talking about?
So again, there is no real standard. Like there is no, and different agencies measure things in different ways, right? The on-time performance window can depend and vary. The groups that we're part of, the rail group is an international group, the bus group is a US group. On the mobility side, again, we're struggling a little bit here. On-time performance has dipped below 90%. We have been working really closely with our contractors and the unions that they work with to increase wages. And so we're going to be taking a package to the Board of Public Works to increase the wages for those operators to try and get that on-time performance back where it needs to be so that they can hire additional operators. This is a big focus because we know that the people who use mobility really rely on that service, and we need to get back up to above 93%. And for definitions here, fixed route equivalency is basically the comparison to the time it would take if you took a fixed route bus. So if I, was going from here to downtown, how, it takes me 30 minutes on the 94. If the mobility trip takes me within that kind of same time frame, that's the fixed route equivalency that we're looking at. Our goal there is above 85%. On the hiring side, our vacancy rate does continue to go down. Our operator vacancy rate is 1% as of March, which is really fantastic. The team is really focused on hiring operators, has been very successful in doing so. Agency-wide, we're about 4.5%. So again, continue to really focus on hiring and bringing more people in the door.
Holly, I know you guys deserve a lot of credit for the outreach you've been doing, and I'm sure that's had a lot to do with it. Has there been a general trend in the industry, or, is that reflective to some extent of a trend where we're, starting to fill vacancies across the market?
So interestingly, when I was at the APTA conference, there was a lot of discussion still on hiring and folks' ability to hire. I think it just depends on what your union contract is, what you're paying, and then what your market is. There does not seem to be a trend across the entire industry. I think a lot of agencies have seen some success. There's a lot of agencies that are still really struggling. So it kind of is across the board. Pay is the main differentiator here. If you can get your pay that's enough above what Amazon is paying, sorry, I know Erin, you love your Amazon folks, but I need my folks to make more. Then it makes a big difference in terms of being able to bring people in.
Can you just tell us what those numbers are, real numbers? Do you know?
So our operators start out, I think it's just shy of $26 an hour. It'll go up in July 1st when we have a contractual change. For MTA, it takes 3 years to get to the top rate. The top rate right now is 37 something. So within 3 years, then it increases each year. By the end of this contract, it'll be at $40 an hour. So at the end of, people starting today, by the end of the contract will be at $40 an hour.
Do you have any sense of what the gap is to the number that you think would be? I mean, you're 1% on the operator, so maybe the answer is you're doing okay. But, when you sit around, do you think, I wish that 26 were this number to sort of deal with meeting employers?
So we're able to bring folks in pretty well. The struggle that we have is just continuing retirements. We have a lot of folks who are retirement eligible and retirement age. They've hit their 30 years, they get their pension, and they're ready to go. So there's some churn there. So we're just kind of like replacing right now. I think the main thing is just the amount of pins that we have. I'd like to have more of an extra board than what we have right now. So the extra board is the folks who aren't necessarily signed up for a run, but whatever someone calls out, they're able to kind of take that specific run. Right now, on any given day with planned and unplanned absences, we lose about 22% of our operators. So getting an extra board above 22% is really kind of the goal at the moment.
Thanks for the question. So when you say your operator vacancy rate, this includes light rail, bus, all of them is below 1%. So then I think it is important because we still got some concerns with on-time performance. And
so I think the cut service is the larger concern. On-time performance is more schedule-based, but the cut service, that's the number that's really directly tied to operator availability. So that goes back to
absenteeism.
So the absenteeism, and that's when getting the extra board above 22%, which is what we're losing every day in terms of, again, planned and unplanned absences. That's really where we need to get in order to be able to kind of cover that.
So it's fine to show that we are fully staffed, but when we really talk about if operators are actually at work, it tells a different story. Because if you're at 22%, that's almost 25% of the workforce that's not there.
Yep, so my goal would be to get to a extra board of 25%. We need additional pins in order to do that.
So there's 25%, are they out because of FLMA, they out because of workers' comp, where are they?
All of the above.
was gonna ask, how much does, especially on buses, the perception of reality of violence affecting both hiring and retention?
It's something we hear from operators in particular. That is a national trend where operator assaults has increased across the country and has increased at MTA. We're still in like the 40 to 50 people per year who are being assaulted, which is still obviously way too many. It's not something that comes up a lot in terms of recruitment, but in terms of just retention, I think that is something that we're really looking at. New York MTA worked with their union to design a bus that has an operator barrier shield that goes all the way to the window. Ours go pretty far, but not quite all the way there. And so we're gonna be on our next round of bus by piloting that, seeing how it works here, seeing how the operators like it, as one way to kind of present results.
Housekeeping, Don, the commissioners who are on Zoom, are they able to, they have a method, do we have an arrangement in terms of if they have questions, et cetera?
They can raise their hand, and we should see that, or they can put something in the chat.
I'm not paying attention, so yeah, you or Jake or somebody, okay, I just wanna make sure we're good, thank you.
Holly, given that operator assaults are an unfortunate reality for all transit agencies, what do mental health resources and emotional support look like at MTA to deal with this really unfortunate reality that's just part of the MTA?
So there's kind of two ways. So the state, as being part of the state, there's a My MD Cares. So it's a website, a phone number, I believe that you can text in order to get mental health support, right? So we put that out at all of our divisions, encourage folks to reach out. And this is an ongoing conversation. We do quarterly kind of wellness events, and mental health is a big topic of conversation at those events about just making sure you're reaching out, before you start to feel like you're having issues. If someone is assaulted and has a specific event, we do, as part of the contract with Concentra, we have and can make available additional resources to that person specific to that event.
One more clarification, you had mentioned earlier, and I wanna make sure I understood. You're cutting routes, which means you need fewer employees because you have less routes. Is that part of the gap closure as well?
So the routes are on the commuter bus side, which are fully contracted. So MTA employees separate, yeah. Thank you.
Press on, please.
Ridership, I do just want to celebrate here, ridership continues to trend upward. Q1 ridership was up 12% year over year from 2023. And then 9 of the last 12 months, we have exceeded 5 million rides. So people really are returning to the system, continuing to get out there and ride. October of last year was our highest ridership month post-COVID. October every year tends to be the highest. I think it's a combination of back to school, back to work, but that is consistently a trend for us. On the MARC Mobility and Metro, they all reached post-COVID ridership highs in March. So mobility has really surpassed the pre-COVID ridership levels as of Q1, which really, going back to the on-time performance, we really need to make sure that we are ensuring we have enough operators providing that quality service. And then overall, our ridership is about 80% recovered from COVID. And I don't want to, yes, Steve.
On the ridership, have you guys been able to determine a trend? Is there an east-west kind of favorability, west-east favorability, north-south? Just generally, as you look at the system, how is it flowing? Connecting us to the region. Just if they're able to pull that data.
I mean, so I think I'd be happy to share, ridership by route. I think that if that would be helpful, we can make sure we provide that to you guys. It's kind of across the board. There's every route we're seeing increases. Even the commuter ones, which were kind of lagging behind for a long time, have continued to see kind of those post-COVID highs as more people are returning to work.
Generally, as a region, how are we moving? Do we have insight into that? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I don't think we've seen trends on that. I think again, it's kind of just everywhere and down.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a big explosion. Okay.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's everywhere is increasing. More people coming downtown. Again, it's folks are going back to work and work in the office. And I don't wanna steal too much of Liz's thunder, but I did just wanna let you guys know, we launched on April 23rd, our Be More bus plan. So we kind of talked about this at the last commission meeting of looking at with additional resources, including building up to a 5th bus division, but additional mechanics, additional operators, additional buses. What could we see from a different bus system or an upgraded bus system? So we're not looking at a bus network redesign, we've done that, but really just kind of where could we think about more frequency? Are there destinations that we're not serving? Could we consider more service overnight, weekends, some of those kind of off hours? And so Liz will talk about that in a little bit. Just a few other quick hit updates. On the Red Line, we did announce that we were recruiting volunteers for the community advisory team. Fairly similar to what was done last time around, there was a kind of team of volunteers who supported the project, provided insight into their communities and kind of helped with cheerleaders. It was very popular. We had over 300 applications, and so narrowing that down to 25 people is very difficult, but we've been partnering with the city and the county on that, and we'll be making that announcement within the next month or so. We partnered with the Autism Transit Project. This is something that is done nationally, where people with autism are invited into the transit agency. We had them record safety messages that played on our light rail and our metro system. Really positive. I think everyone enjoyed it. We're gonna make sure that we continue to lead in those efforts to bring more people into the system. We also participated in National Walking Day because every transit rider starts or ends their journey as a pedestrian, so it's an important partnership for us. And then those groups that I mentioned that were part of the light rail and core bus, the national and international group, are doing some surveys. So they do survey, they have all of their members do surveys about how their service is working, and so we are participating in those now. We put out links to our riders and are encouraging folks to participate. All right, and I'm gonna stop there. If there's no additional questions, we can move on to the major projects update.
Okay.
Morning, everyone. I'm Fred Lippert. I'm the Director of Baltimore Regional Planning at MTA, and I'm happy to be able to give you some project updates this time. So we were just talking about fleet replacements. Last time we mentioned the zero emission bus program. We have a few more fleet replacements that we're going through. Obviously, we were just talking about the Metro rail car replacements. My coffee cup at home may say life begins at 40, not so much with these rail cars. This is a project that is actually a little further along than our zero emission bus program. As the administrator noted, it started in 2017. It's a $450 million project replacing the entire fleet. We're also installing new signal systems. And as the administrator mentioned, we've got some good news. Trains are already under construction. We're anticipating revenue service to begin in 2025. The first trains set that we've got that we're testing out was delivered last September. And she also mentioned that the manufacturing of these handsome Hitachi models there is moving to the Hagerstown plant. So it's nearby. Moving on to another generational fleet replacement, our light rail vehicles. Obviously, it's no surprise to this group that last December we had a shutdown. All of our light rail vehicles have either exceeded their useful life or they will reach the end of their useful life within the next 5 years. We're going to replace these cars with a modern low floor. That means you can board at any door, no longer requiring folks who need assistance getting up those stairs to one point of entry. And we're getting some help with paying for this. MTA was successful in a federal discretionary grant win from the Rail Vehicle Replacement Program to the tune of $213 million. The state is contributing $90 million to that. to an overall vehicle replacement cost of around $450 million. But that's not the total cost. As much as we'd love to just get those new cars, put them out on the rails and call it good, this kind of generational change in vehicle means that the vehicles are different and we're gonna have to do other upgrades. So the full cost is really around 1.3 billion. You say, wait, that's a huge increase. Well, here's why. The vehicles are obviously newer, but different. They have different operating envelope. They're more narrow. So that's going to force redesign of stations, our platforms. We're gonna have to update our maintenance facilities, our signaling systems. And with all these physical changes out there in the world, that also means our people are gonna need training on these new things. And so that's not just operators or our mechanics, but we're talking about dispatchers, scheduling systems, engineering, all these folks who are working around, even the emergency responders who respond to these vehicles when they're out there, will need some additional training. But with all this cost comes some great benefits. Improve reliability. Right now, when we can't get a train out there because of a maintenance issue, that impacts our ability to provide the service and affects things like on-time service. With these new cars, we're gonna improve that reliability, increase frequency because we have more cars to put out there. Of course, improved access, especially during high volume events when everyone can just walk on board as opposed to navigating stairs to climb up in. It obviously makes it a lot more friendly, and that is what we're looking for. And of course, anytime you're upgrading our stations, it's going to be a much nicer experience for our passengers. But this is a major project. It has multiple things moving at different rates and different times. And so it goes beyond just a vehicle replacement issue, as we were talking about the station improvements, improving our yards and our maintenance facilities. So all of these things are moving on different timelines. Even just the ability to get the light rail cars that we want isn't simply going out to the showroom and saying, hey, that one looks good. It's a process of coming up with the specifications we are looking for, the ability to reach out to manufacturers and put out in an RFP, hey, who can deliver on this, selecting from them. All of that drives this timeline to an extent that we're looking at here on this slide, where we see these various pieces moving together. So we're looking for vehicle delivery in 2030. We're anticipating to be fully up and running with replacements and station facilities upgraded by 2032.
I just have to ask a question. So on your previous slide, you mentioned that your vehicles have exceeded life or will exceed life in 5 years. Your vehicle delivery is 2030. Am I reading that wrong? And how many vehicles are you talking about? So am I reading into this that all of the vehicles would have exceeded its life expectancy before a vehicle even hits
Yes,
a new vehicle?
that's correct. We should have in 2012, instead of overhauling vehicles, we should have started the process to replace them. We didn't. It was a decision that was made by different administration, and so here kind of where we are at this point. So we're gonna have to work and do our best to keep the vehicles going for the next 10 years.
And how many vehicles do we expect in 2030?
55 is the total that we are going to replace the fleet.
So a whole new fleet in 2030.
2032.
And similar to the Metro, they will come, phase in, right? So we'll get the first vehicles, they'll be here, they'll test, the first one will go into service, and they will be phased in over time. It tends to be, one a month that you'll start to get in, it'll go through acceptance testing, go into service, you'll take a legacy vehicle out. So we'll be running a mixed fleet between give or take 2030 and 2032.
Can I ask a practical question? How do you run a mixed fleet when they have different entry?
Absolutely, yeah.
seems to me you have to, oh, you get the point.
So we would have to, keep the high blocks out there for the trains that require those. We'll have modifications on our new trains to be able to make up the gap in platform, with it being a little bit narrower, we're gonna have to have a ramp that can deploy and be able to assist those getting from walking on and off. So it is a process.
So that's fairly standard. So again, just getting back from Portland, they have low floor trains when when the doors open, a ramp deploys to cover the gap. So that is not something that the industry is not unfamiliar with, so.
So what are we doing to maintain the life of the existing fleet as we are phasing in? Since we know it's going to be a phasing process, what are we doing to maintain the life of the existing fleet?
So we're still working to complete the overhaul in warranty time, working with Alstom there. And we're looking at our maintenance staff, how many staff we have, looking at potentially adding staff or adding contractors to help us keep the going until then.
What's your vacancy rate with your maintenance personnel?
I would have to look into it as low.
Low, oh, good.
You also, sorry,
So it's low, and we have the same amount of maintenance folks that we had when the system opened. And given we have 30-year-old vehicles that require more maintenance, we need more maintenance staff.
And that have the capacity and skill set to operate the more modern vehicles as well, right? Because it's not about just trading a wrench anymore. We're going to have more high volume and modernized fleet.
Yeah, so that's when we're looking at the vehicles, looking at lowest replaceable unit, it's gonna be a big piece of that to try and streamline the maintenance on these vehicles. And so that's one of the things we're gonna be asking from manufacturers.
maybe this is a quick asterisk, but you have said previously, just want to remind folks that you're hoping to use this whole process also as the means to order potentially cars for Redline, assuming there's a light rail. We haven't made that decision yet, I understand, but if you go in that direction, correct,
Yes.
you would.
So if light rail is the selected mode for the red line, we would have the opportunity to purchase the same vehicles so that you would have a unified fleet. So it looks more like a system versus two separate lines.
Quick question from a more global perspective. Do we have a process in place or recommendations you would make to this commission, so future ourselves after 2032? That we're not having this issue as we move forward, to make sure that we're constantly trying to, I know that's the ideal world, right, is constantly keep up with the system, the maintenance. Is there a kind of a best practice or a schedule that we should be mindful of as a regional?
I think it's really just having the consistent level of funding that the agency needs. I mean, when you go back to 2007, we were in a recession. That's when we should have done the overhaul. It got delayed because of that. Again, decisions were made in 2012. It was more expensive to buy new vehicles than to overhaul. So we make a lot of decisions based on what is the cheapest and not necessarily what's best for the agency.
I got one, Fred. So I definitely understand the mix and match that's coming. When the MBTA in Boston did their most recent light rail replacement, if I'm not mistaken, they used Breda, who's a division of Hitachi now, to couple with their old Kinki Chariot cars. They had major problems with coupling and derailments because of the mix and match, just the nature of the beast. It's like 20 some years ago, but it caused it was a really challenging issue for everybody in Metro Boston. How do you guys, given the limited amount of producers out there, how do you guys look at trying to manage the necessity of having decades of mix and match, decades apart in technology, and avoiding some of those pitfalls which created major problems for just about anybody who had to touch the light rail system? I fully get it. I lived through it as a transit advocate in Boston before living in Baltimore, and so I'm excited about this, but I'm also wondering what you guys have learned and can implement mistakes of other transit agencies, so that this region doesn't have to live through, now we have 70 new cars that don't exactly pair nicely with the old fleet. And for almost a decade, the old cars had to drag the new cars because the new cars were not confidently able to run without fear of derailment. And that's what I'm thinking about, and curious how you guys, all this technology and all this current thought, how do you account for all that so that we don't?
You're on Kate, jump in on this one since you're, I can take that real quick.
I'm also mindful of the time. I mean, you should answer and I, of course.
I'm Kate Sylvester, I'm the Deputy Administrator for the MTA. So a couple of things there. One is safety oversight has changed quite a bit, and that's also part of what's driving the schedule on these projects. The safety testing processes that we go through, that's that 18-month process, and it's extremely rigorous because of some of the history and just because of the environment that we're in. That's a piece of it. You're also hearing that on both Metro and Light Rail, we're replacing the entire fleet. So we're not planning to run mixed fleets over decades because that is extremely challenging from an operational perspective. So we have this changeover period where we're burning in new cars and getting rid of the old cars. And so we do what we can. We have 2 light rail facilities, so we'll operate 1 fleet out of each facility. We likely won't couple those 2 different cars together, but that integration process is really critical. We think really hard about that and how we procure these things and what we bundle together to help put that risk on the manufacturers rather than on the state. So it's a really key piece of how we do this, but there are some safeguards in place that have been amassed in the industry over the years.
It's good. And I don't mean to discourage questions whatsoever, because we all have to educate ourselves, but I'm also mindful of time. So let's.
Absolutely, we have lots to cover in there. Speaking of success with federal discretionary grant wins, our Mondamin Raise grant was a recent win. It's a $20 million grant that we are putting towards our Mondamin hub, which is a primary metro bus transit center for MTA. You know, this is in a serves a half dozen majority Black neighborhoods in West Baltimore. It's also the primary public transit access point for Druid Hill Park, a 745-acre amenity. So what are we going to be spending that on? It's really going to be focused on safety, accessibility, state of good repair, and sustainability improvements. But what do those look like? There's a lot of complex systems happening out of the public view, especially with the metro and things going on there. So state of good repair refers to those types of projects, as well as environmental sustainability type projects that are often not in the forefront of the public view. Things like regenerative braking systems, producing sustainable electricity. Also, surface impervious surface water capture and stormwater capture. And so these things are not generally the first things that people see. So some of the things that are some of the station upgrades, things like pedestrian safety at intersections. This location is at the hub of many high-speed multi-lane roads. This was from a time when pedestrian movement was not prioritized, and it really shows in how much of an island the Mondamin bus hub can be. We're working to improve that through intersection safety improvements, things that will make getting to the station easier. We're also looking at connections. So connecting to high schools, the universities that are nearby, and even down to the improvements and things that are happening on North Avenue. When is all this going to come into play? Well, we're really at the beginning stages. We've just kicked off the project. It's exciting because we're going to be able to reach out to the public and get their input and influence on some of the things we're planning that are in their purview and their interest. Obviously, things like a lot of state of good repair. These are projects that are a little further along, and we're able to direct this funding to that to keep them moving. So this summer, we will be developing our concepts, really clarifying the vision for what we're doing on the top side and around the station, and continuing that planning effort into late 2024 as we move to refine our planning into engineering documents and hope to be in construction by early 2027 and completing it by 2030.
2030 is gonna be a big year.
Generational. So another project. One of our first 2 corridor studies that came out of the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan. This was the north-south corridor study. We recently wrapped up the feasibility study. And you can see on the right of this image, some of the scenarios that we developed to help us think through what could be possible in this corridor. These scenarios were not designed to be a buffet to pick from and say, I want that. It was more an idea about how do we ask the right questions moving forward as we narrow down our focus, as we consider things like what's the alignment or the route this will actually take, because there are some options in there. What is the mode or the vehicle that we will use to accomplish this transit? So in asking these questions and creating scenarios, we're able to also go out to the public and get their initial thoughts, their reactions to some of this. We published the results of this feasibility study in December, and we found out quite a few things. We found out where the highest performing segments were, and they're indicated on this map by the dark maroon line, solid line. And some of these are not a surprise. Between Towson and 33rd Street inside the city, high performing. What do I mean by that? I mean, there's already strong ridership. There's land use conditions that support even more density and riders. So things like that indicate to us, hey, this is operating and deserving of premium transit investment. Another area would be between Penn Station and Charles Center. So, but coming out of this, we also are moving into a new phase of this, and we're just ready to kick off this summer. It's the alternatives analysis phase, and it's really going to dive into the things that stood out to us as needing more investigation. How do you get between the 33rd and Penn Station? What's the best route there? Do we stay on Greenmount? Do we hop over to St. Paul? All of these things need further study, and that's what this next phase is about. This next phase will also look more directly at what specific alignment and what specific mode should we be focusing on. And it's from this next phase that we will be advancing into concept design and further evaluating the benefits.
Fred, and maybe Holly, this is a mega question I'm about to ask, and I'm not so much asking us to engage in it now, but I want to ask you just, would help me or maybe us to understand what the sort of planning horizon is for this stuff. Meaning, how do you decide, when do you decide to do, for example, a north-south corridor study? When funds are not yet identified for it, when there are other things that maybe are, state of good repair, other things that are in the queue. In other words, you can't stop planning, because then if manna fell from heaven, you would have no plans and you'd never know what to do. So, but how do you decide that it's worth doing this now with an unknown implementation and funding horizon? Because I guess what I'm getting at most broadly is, how many things can or should we be doing at one time? And in what stage of the design and construction process, what's sensible? And when, I mean, this is a critical study. I mean, it's obvious, but like, when is it too much? When do you sort of say, look, like, we just like, let's not even push the train away from the station, no pun intended, because we don't really know what the end looks like. And how do you balance that against, like, yeah, but if we don't plan ahead and we don't vet all these issues, then we're not gonna have any plans and we'll never expand. So if you want to comment on the brief, that's fine. I do not want to have a big discussion about it because we don't have time. But these are the kinds of questions, at least for me, and I think for other commissioners, because the kind of question they're asking, these things provoke. And I do think the commission has to sort of help process some of that stuff.
So I'll jump in here, so if you remember, one of the charges of the commission is to help us update the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan. The two, the Red Line and the North-South Corridor study both came from the prior version of the plan. It's a 25-year plan with a 25-year horizon. I personally think that, you know, we don't yet have the system the region needs and deserves, so we need to keep planning for these things. Yes, agreed, we don't have the money today, but this is how you help build consensus for the vision that the region needs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a totally reasonable response. I'm just trying to.
But I mean, I think as the group is working towards the plan, that's a very valid question to
Okay,
have.
well, we're gonna get this, I guess, a tease up. I see you have RTP coming up, so no need to.
Absolutely, and you know, building into that actually is a great lead into this next slide about the Eastern Baltimore County Access Study. Because it ties into what the administrator was talking about. You know, we have the RTP, that update is gonna be talked about after me. But the RTP East-West Corridor Feasibility Study is what we were pursuing. And to your comment, John, when money comes from the sky, when things get reinvigorated, such as the Red Line, we're able to see that East-West Corridor Feasibility Study assisted us in this right here. So because of the Red Line's focus and previous work and trying to take advantage of as much of the previous work that was done to accelerate that timeline and keep us on track, it ended in Bayview. But because of the East-West corridor study, we knew that there was potential demand east of Bayview, where the Red Line had previously planned to end. And so out of that kind of planning effort, we're able to recognize that, hey, there is more out there that we can capture and go after. And so that's what this study is really about, is not letting that hard-earned info and get away from us. So this study we've kicked off. We're excited to, a week from today, actually be out there in the field doing a tour and a workshop, looking at where the potential extension of the transit that will end at Bayview, where Red Line's current terminus is, could look like. What could its terminuses be? I mean, there's termini. We have to take a look at these in detail, and Trade Point Atlantic is obviously an interested party in this study, but so is Essex and other points east. Looking at all of that in total and giving it its fair assessment and shape is what this study is all about. I think that actually is going to bring me to the next piece.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fred.
Any questions for Fred? Besides, how did he get such a good opening joke? Hey, good morning. I know many of you, but this is my first time here at BRTC, so I'll do an introduction. I'm Liz Gordon. I'm the Assistant Deputy Administrator for Planning and Programming at MTA. Okay, so the Regional Transit Plan update, I think, probably is the place for a really abbreviated version of the discussion that John was sort of introing, which is, so to start at the bottom, this body, this commission, has the legislatively required role to approve this document. So this document was initially written in 2020 on a 5-year update cycle. And at that time, there was not the BRTC. So there was a group formed just for that plan. But now this body will be approving that plan. And so that update will get into some of the questions that John was talking about, which is basically, even within the funding realities that we understand now, what does a vision look like to advocate for? And also, what should we be teeing up from a funding readiness and a project readiness standpoint, right? So we know that there are some things that we have to do in the 2025 update. Things have changed just a little bit since 2020. So we will be reassessing the existing conditions. So that's looking for travel pattern changes post-COVID. To Aaron's point earlier, how is the region moving now? And we'll look at that both from a latent demand standpoint in terms of just where the trips are occurring, who's taking them. And also we'll be using some of our updated data on our system from the origin and destination survey and a bunch of other sources to really look at the post-COVID travel patterns geographically and also time of day. We'll be reporting on the implementation steps that we have taken since 2020 because we have been moving forward on that plan's vision. One of the things that the 2020 plan did is it set out a pretty broad vision for corridors in the region, 30-ish, that have the demand and the emerging nodes of density and destinations to merit potential transit investment in the future. But that look was pretty high level. A couple of those were advanced. That was the east-west and north-south corridor feasibility studies that Fred was talking to. But there's a whole other universe of corridors out there that we need to sort of reassess a little bit in terms of the land use patterns and trends that we're seeing now. And also get a little more detail on what we think is called for there. So we will be developing that initial list of regional corridors into a more detailed and prioritized project pipeline. We will also be refining our really high-level cost estimates and our potential expansion budget needs. To your point, John, that's where we will really be thinking about, what would it take? What are the funding sources that are out there? And what do we need to do from a pursuit readiness standpoint with these potential prioritized projects to be ready? Because you cannot go to our federal partners with a napkin sketch or an idea and say, I would like several $billion. That project has to be pretty well developed before you can do those pursuits and access those really large pots of money. And so that once you've prioritized the big long list, making sure that those projects are developed enough to be ready to pursue funding is very important and is part of what's going on here. Does that?
Yeah, it's great. And
Frame it up.
Don can get your way in here, but obviously MTA and BMC staff are gonna have to figure out the process by which, I think what the commission will expect is, you're the subject matter experts and you have access to everything. We're not gonna do the plan line by line. On the other hand, don't bring us something at the end and say, here's the plan, right?
No, we
So
would not do that.
somewhere in between,
Yeah.
and we've got to figure out what it is and how it works. And I don't know whether the last time around when there was the standalone commission to do that, I don't know what the sort of work plan looked like, but obviously we need to come up with a work plan, a timeline and so on, and all those things are pretty obvious, I think.
Yep, we are, sorry, go ahead.
So, quick and easy question.
Sure.
During the initial development of the plan, was project delivery methods considered as a component of that?
In that plan, that wasn't really touched on. It was sort of big and broad.
It was more broader, okay.
Which I think is okay for a region's
Okay,
first
just
look
wasn't-
at
I
a.
wasn't sure
Yeah,
that was a consideration
yeah.
at that time. Okay.
Yeah, so for the region's first look at a 25-year vision, that felt appropriate. It was big, it was broad, it was visionary, and I think the time has come and we're glad to be in partnership with this group to refine things a little and look at some of those project delivery and prioritization things. John, yeah, you'll be meeting the team and we'll be talking through what the work plan and schedule will look like. For a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, we're ramping up that team now, scoping with them, and the scope will have room in it so that we can accommodate engagement.
Is that a consultancy that you're using for that? Do you know, are you obviously know who, tell us who it is?
Yeah, so it's going to be managed by someone from WSP. It's gonna be they're in a joint venture with RK&K. So it is sort of the usual suspects who we have access to at MTA through our on-call contracts. And when we need specific subject matter expertise for something, we use our contracts as well and as fully as we can to pull in the people that we need. So it's taking shape a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, John, we've interacted with each other on commissions before, and so I often think of you with the what are we gonna accomplish on what timeline, at what cost, with what caveats? And that's sort of part of the framing here as well.
I like it, it's good.
Is that a framing that you approve of? Like, you just spoke it out loud to me at the Bike Commission 27 times, so it's done. If there are no questions on the RTP update, we will talk capital needs inventory. Okay, so if you think of kind of the two sides of the coin for MTA's planning, the long-term vision of the RTP and the really sort of specific look at our state of good repair of the capital needs inventory, those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. So the capital needs inventory is basically the key guidance document that's produced by our asset management program. And our asset management program is, in my opinion, something that we can be pretty proud of. We at this point have a very good understanding of what we own and where it is, and a pretty good sense of what condition everything is in. At a minimum, we understand how old everything is and where it is in its expected useful life. When we have our regularized inspection programs go out into the field, we then annually update our inventory, and any inspection that says something different than what we expect from the age-based useful life benchmark, we update it. So we feel pretty good about the CNI and the guidance it gives us for making decisions. We last published it in 2022. It's updated every 3 years, so it is coming. And basically what it gives us really good information about is the state of good repair of our assets and the value and the amount of money that we would have to invest in order to bring all of those assets into a state of good repair. It does not constrain the view based on our funding. It doesn't say, you know, here's what you could accomplish with the amount of funding you have. It instead says, here's what the age of your assets says that you need from an investment standpoint in order to achieve a system that is in a state of good repair. State of good repair does not mean that everything is gold-plated and perfect and new. It just means that we would have the expectation that it is reliable and functional and up to industry standards. So when we are talking about the categories of investment that the CNI advises us on, it's those state of good repair projects, but it's also enhancement projects. And so these are capital investments that aren't fixing something that's on its last legs, but they are necessary modernization because this is a very technology intensive and a very data intensive industry. And so sometimes the technology moves on, and maybe your BlackBerry functions, but maybe you need to upgrade to something different. And so those are considered enhancement investments. They are still important to make, and they should be distinguished from the expansion projects like the Purple Line or the Red Line. And they're really important from a passenger facing standpoint. They're also, I will note, the kind of investment that tends to get squeezed out in favor of the base state of good repair investments when we're in a constrained funding environment. We have been using this CNI data to help make our capital programming decisions, to plan what our state of good repair capital program looks like. And we've been improving that over time and incorporating the input of our newly formed Program Management Oversight Office in order to inform our yearly project selection process and generally put together a state of good repair program that is sensible and strategic and minimizes disruption on our railroads. What you don't want to do is do a state of good repair program project that requires a shutdown, complete it, and then come right back and do another one in the same location 3 months later. So it's management coordination. One of the things that's a really key output of the CNI is our annualized budget need in order to achieve a state of good repair. When we did the CNI in 2022, the annualized state of good repair investment need was roughly $512 million. And what that would mean was that if we invested 512 million a year in state of good repair projects, we could expect that in about 10 years from that document, by 2032, we would have a system in a state of good repair. Things have changed budget-wise since the 2022 CNI. And so our backlog has grown because that $512 million a year of investment did not occur. And the budget situation has changed. So now, if you look at that bottom chart, if we spend our entire capital program every year between now and 2043, you can expect that we'll have about the same level of state of good repair backlog. We'll have about the same condition of assets and therefore reliability of the system. We will be updating the CNI, as I said, it's coming, that team is getting started, they are doing math. And we can expect to come out of that update that the needs per year will be much higher than 512 million. And so the reason that we can expect that is we will have important groups of assets predicted to reach their end of useful life within the 10-year CNI window. We will have new assets coming into our portfolio, which will require upkeep. We will have more complete information about our needs on the ZEB transition and the fleet replacement, and so we can expect some of those needs to show up in the 10-year window. And then we have expansion projects going on. So we're gonna have the availability payments to the purple line. We're gonna have red line planning and project development, that the spending on that project, that need is gonna ramp up over the time of the CNI window. And we also will have our Frederick Douglass tunnel contributions and several other things. So we can expect that the annualized need over the 10-year CNI window will be quite a bit higher because we think that total will be approaching 10 billion for our needs.
So it just happens to be that the CNI update and the RTP update are in the same year. Obviously, it doesn't, they're on like a different, but every
Yeah.
once in a while, the lines intersect.
That's right, it's an eclipse. But it'll be good, and I think that they're
Well, it's good for the commission, because it's
Yeah.
actually a really good opportunity for us to see these two giant, these giant moving parts at the
Yeah.
same time.
and I think they're documents that can and should inform each other and that create a little bit of tension between each other, and I'm glad that we're gonna get to talk about both. Okay. Need more bus. So Holly talked about this a little. Be More Bus is, we were thinking of it as a bit of a short-range transit plan in the sense that it's not what the RTP is, where we're taking a big broad vision, but it's also not our annual service planning process, which is very responsive to the conditions on the ground in each given year. It's sort of something in the middle, where it takes our heavy hauling mode bus, and it really puts the focus on it in terms of what can we do to improve this system that most of our riders use in a way that is realistic and grounded. And so we are looking at an opportunity here to be a little bit visionary about what we could accomplish once we build and staff a 5th bus division. But we're also looking at the things that we can do in the meantime. So what we have discovered in talking to an awful lot of people about what they want in terms of bus service is that if you ask them, what would you like from the bus? They will say, I would like for it to run more often. I would like for there to be a stop in front of my house. I would like for there to be no stops between my house and the destination. And I would also like for it to go new places. And so obviously some of those things are in tension with one another. And so we're being thoughtful about balancing data-driven information about what the needs are on our system with public and stakeholder priorities, and also a little bit of education for our riding public on how those things are in tension with one another. So our first public touch point right now, we're not doing the big public open house thing because we're basically just announcing that the plan is active and asking for input. And so what we have done is we have put up a very short survey, which can be accessed by smartphone or computer, and we also are having some people out on the system with some paper versions. We're really advertising it hard on our system because we really want to hear from writers. And we're also pushing it out through all of our stakeholder groups, our social media, stuff like that. The survey itself really does some of that education, talking about giving people the tools to express what they want in terms of limited stop service versus more local service, of span versus frequency. It explains how our system works now, and it allows people to tell us, you know, are there a few key destinations that we don't serve that we really should? And are there a few key priorities that you would rank? And also just what should we know about your experience on the bus? And this first touch point is all leading up to follow-up public engagement, which will be more in-depth, which is where people will really weigh different approaches to allocating potential future resources.
So quick question for you. You stated that you engage with an awful lot of people and
We sure do.
stakeholders, and the method by which you will do so. Will you also, one of your touch points would also be engagement with local jurisdictions that also provide a service as well? And
Oh,
what does
with
that
our-
look like?
With our lots providers. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've been talking about in our vision for this service and as we're sort of developing our scenarios is that there are some destinations where maybe it makes sense for our locally operated providers to be providing that service. You know, we're not gonna make a suggestion to our peers in a vacuum. So certainly engagement with our locally operated providers, particularly as we have information to share about what the demands are in that area, that will definitely be part of it.
What does that framework look like? Have you developed that yet?
I don't think we've developed that in a ton of detail, although we will. And we do have really regular conversations with those providers through our Office of Local Transit Support. And those team members are definitely pulled in on this conversation to coordinate it closely.
Okay, like Baltimore City, Baltimore County DOT and others, and okay.
Yeah, all of our lots providers in the core service region, Anne Arundel.
Just what's the timeline for this? Is there an end date for the actual Be More Bus project?
This one's fast. Yeah, we want to get feedback on our recommendations in the fall and winter so that we can sort of finalize everything by the end of the calendar year.
So what I would ask you to do is, I obviously would like to keep track of it, because
Yeah.
if there's, you know, if you can schedule some sort of interim, here's what we're hearing sort of item between now and then.
Yep,
You know,
we can do
at
that.
a time you think is appropriate where you have enough, but it isn't fully baked yet.
Sure, absolutely.
Just questions, does this ask about like mode switch or desired, you know, time between stops or those types of questions that.
Transfers.
Yeah, the things that people
Yeah.
actually have to do on the service.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We've made changes over time. We did a bus network redesign in Baltimore Link, and we make changes each year through the annual service plan. We have found before and after all of those changes that the rate of people who transfer stays pretty flat. It stays pretty consistent. The individual people who have to transfer, depending on how the routes are structured, that changes. And so we do hear people say that they would prefer a one-seat ride. And we do also hear people raise things about missed connections and mistimed connections. And so those are definitely things that we are trying to attend to. And we're also hopeful that some of the data that we're looking at in terms of origins and destinations, both from model data and from our surveys, can help us get even closer to understanding the trips that people are trying to make, so that some higher proportion could potentially be a one-seat ride. But when you're trying to crisscross a whole region, some number of people do end up having to transfer.
Which actually gets me to my next question, which is, you know, some of what, I guess maybe what I think about is, what is it that we would like to have?
Yeah,
And so how do we get to either aspirational riders, choice riders, you know, people who may be riding, you know, maybe making a decision about going to the ball game? And how do we collect that information? Because we want to convert, you know,
Yeah.
more people
Yeah.
to this, and building a constituency that wants to advocate and support this, so that as we try to get more dollars, you know, we're actually building a population that's saying, I would do this, but for.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. So one of the reasons that we're really trying to hit the system is because often when we distribute surveys just through our social media and through email lists, we end up kind of disproportionately representing choice riders and the people who might ride, as opposed to the actual riders on our system. And I think that there's another category in there of the sometimes rider.
Yeah.
So we want to hit the system enough that the rider who would ride more if it worked better can be giving us the input. And then in terms of the choice riders, we do hope that the social media blasts, the outreach that we're doing through partners and that sort of thing is where we can reach those folks, because those are both really important perspectives.
Do we capture this information, like, or would we be able to capture this kind of stuff, like when people are riding on the light rail, when they have like 15 or 20 minutes to do nothing else?
So we have car cards with QR codes on the.
Yeah, so so in addition to having people on the system doing outreach, like Holly said, you know, we've printed the information and the URL and the QR code so that when you're sitting on the light rail, going to the ball game, you can take the survey.
And, you know, I would encourage all of you as well with your networks to put this out there,
Yeah,
because you guys
yeah.
have different networks than we do, and so that would be helpful to get some of those people who we're not hearing from.
Answer it 12 times, but change your writing style.
Okay,
Are you providing that, you know, those posters, that kind of thing to the local service providers? I mean, I'm in Howard County, so I'm representing, like, how are we getting people in Howard County to vote for? You know, so do we at least have that collateral, you know?
You know,
with
I
local
don't
partners?
think we've given car cards to the lots yet, but we can. It's a good idea.
I think it would at least perhaps get more access, right?
Yeah, that's smart. Thank you.
we've got a question here, and then I'd like to try and on, please.
So we did a re-imaging of the bus system, what was it, 5 years ago? How long was it?
2017, Baltimore Lane, yeah.
2017.
That was a
And-
network redesign. This is not a network redesign.
This is not, what would you call this in terms of the difference between the network redesign? Because you're asking for frequent and what they want to see different. So what are these, just adjustments based on recommendations from?
So where the distinction is for us is that we're sort of assuming the network as it is as the starting point. We're not saying throw it out, start over, have people adjust to new names, stuff like that. We're basically saying, what needs are we not meeting at this moment that we could with additional resources? And also, if and as we get additional resources, where do we want to focus them? And what is your opinion on serving new destinations versus more frequency on key routes, trade-offs, things like that? But the difference that makes it not a network redesign in our eyes is that it's about prioritizing additional resources from the starting point of our network, as opposed to throwing it out and starting over.
Do we have the additional resources to prioritize?
We do not yet have the additional resources to prioritize. We're taking a look at, you know, is there any further efficiency that we can squeeze out of our existing buses and operators? But we've been playing the efficiency game for a long time, and I think we do a pretty good job getting a lot out of our system. For instance, I mean, we deliver double the number of service hours per employee of some of our peers, right? So we're quite efficient. That's one way to put it. But to the point, if we want more resources, I think it's very important for us to explain what we would do with them.
So our service standards, I would think, would dictate what we would do with them if we're not able to meet the service standards, but that's my thought process. I think it's almost a double-edged sword. If we keep asking the public what they want and we don't give the public what they want, why do we keep asking the public what they want?
Well, there's never consensus, right? So,
And it's never gonna.
right. So there's never a point at which the public is asking with one unified voice for something and we're saying, no, we're not gonna do that, right? What's happening is we're getting a lot of input and we're trying to filter through meeting the demands that are, or the recommendations or the desires that are most, that we hear most frequently from the most people, that are backed up by the data-driven look. So a lot of what the public input can do is it can help us take a look at the data that we're analyzing sort of through a new light and through a new lens. And we can learn a lot that way. So we think that the public input is really informative to us. But it is true that we don't wanna, transit plan by plebiscite. We don't wanna, we don't think that would be the most efficient way to do it, but we do try to meet people's desires as we can.
I'm
I'm always-
very intentional about this engagement, to piggyback on what Deandra is saying. We're gonna have to be very intentional in informing people why we are pushing this out and what we plan to do with it.
Agreed.
And that is not just gonna lie dormant. That when we do have the resources, that we'll look to make modifications and execute what the public is saying, and you're correct. We're never gonna have a middle of the road where everybody's saying the same thing, but we'll have to prioritize. And how we communicate that, because people are getting very frustrated with what's not being delivered to them, right? So the comms and messaging around this is gonna have to be very clearly outlined, as well to your regional partners as well, because they'll be the trusted messengers to assist you with this. So we get everything, we're former MDOTers and MTA staff up here. So we totally get what you are trying to do. But the message is gonna have to be so precise that people understand why we are engaging them again.
Totally.
Okay?
So I did want a question here though. We haven't gone out really since Baltimore Link and asked people what they wanted with the bus network. This is fairly, we haven't done it since 2017 when we launched.
Understood, and it's
So-
important,
Yes.
but I was
it is
responding to
important
her
for us
saying
to-
about the intent.
Right, so for
right?
the website, I encourage everyone to check out the
Yeah.
website. It does a really good job of educating people on how service plan works and how bus network
No,
work.
I get it, and I support you, and I totally get it.
No, but I did
for
wanna know.
folks that are not going to the website, because of, some may not, right? How we push out the information and the engagement is gonna be key.
Yeah, but I challenge the MTA to realize that this is a commission that's talking about how we can better transit in the region. I hear a lot of planning. I don't hear that there's money behind the planning to be able to better transit in, better offer transit in the region and what I'm used to is that you're planning out, you have plans, but you're also asking for money in those out years to be able to deliver. There's intention about how you're growing the system. Here, I'm hearing a lot, let's go talk to them again so that we can see what they want, when service standards is what I'm used to, that says, this is gonna be a local service because it meets this criteria. This is gonna be a limited stop service because it meets this criteria. We're gonna grow this bus line in this way because this area is growing because of development. So that we, as the commissioners, can see how are we growing the system to offer more transit in the Baltimore area.
So that's the goal of this, but public outreach is still a piece of it. So public outreach is not driving it. It's mostly gonna be driven by the data that we receive from the OD survey, from the other data, the census data, to tie into that, along with the service standards. We have a frequent transit network. We understand, and you can see up there where we think we would grow that. And the goal is to put out a vision, right? Like, we haven't had a vision of, hey, if you give us this much funding or this many people, this is what you get for it. And so that's what we're trying to do, is put out, hey, you want this visionary network, this is what we need as a region to make that happen.
So as you call that information, right, that is what you will be communicating to the powers that be to assist you and to assist them with informed information, right?
Definitely.
Okay, I'd like to try and move forward because
Yeah.
we've still got a bunch of stuff. So where are we on this? Are you? Okay, I'm gonna ask the Assistant Secretary here, thank you very much, Liz. I know we'll be seeing more of you. I'm gonna switch the next two agenda items just because I'm gonna let Tony give the legislative update, and then we'll turn to the working group discussion, and then the rest of the agenda is a little more administrative, but we don't have a ton of time. And I want to make sure everybody gets to talk about the things we need to talk about. So Tony?
Yes, I think, I'm not sure, did you have a legislative?
There's a few MTA specific slides, I can be real quick, if that's okay.
It all relates, so.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Alright.
So and that's a slide, those are some updates to these slides?
Yes,
Can I know this is like a crazy little housekeeping thing, but when could you together, before you send the slides out to everybody, put some revised or as presented at the commission, something on that title slide so that we have people have two sets of slides floating around, we sort of know which were the slides that were presented before we send them out to everybody and create confusion.
Yes, and I assume, Don, we'll get the current version posted after? Yes. Okay, excellent.
You know what I'm saying, right? Just some sort of indicator.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
ahead.
So good morning, everyone. Kenneth Good, Deputy Chief of Staff at MTA. I also do not have a good coffee mug opening joke, but we'll do a quick summary of the legislative session. So zooming out, as many of you know, the session met between January 10th and April 8th. It was a busy year. Transportation was obviously a hot topic. Specific to MTA, we were tracking over 200 bills. And, you know, shout out to our government affairs team for being active in the legislative process. But so some bills that directly impact the agency. One deals with the automated bus lane enforcement. And so now local jurisdictions statewide now have authority to automate their dedicated bus lane enforcement. And so we've been working with vendors in Baltimore City, particularly on the fixed type of obstruction system. More to come on that. The new law also expands upon the current prohibition of driving a motor vehicle to include standing and parking in a bus lane. And it also establishes the work group on curb space management. MDOT will staff that, and that report will be due by July of next year. There was also the establishment of the Baltimore Convention and Tourism Redevelopment and Operating Authority Task Force. Not sure what the acronym will be yet, but that will be staffed by the Department of Commerce. And basically, we worked with the city to make sure that MTA was a part of that. And we look forward to being, participating in that conversation. And that's going to be coming through by December 1st of this year. In terms of our reporting on service change impacts, so now MTA will be required, or effective July 1st, MTA will be required to basically report on the impacts of any service reduction or cancellation of an existing bus route. And so there's a variety of demographic and business, ridership information that's going to be required. And we will be putting that on our website at least 30 days prior to public hearings starting. There will also be a.
Sorry, will you, when you get into the rhythm of that, could you put us on the sort of distribution, whatever that looks like? We'd like to see those as you're generating them. Either you can send it, you can just send us a link to the website, I don't care.
Oh, this reporting, yes.
Thank you.
Certainly. So there will also be a third-party study to look at service improvements to our mobility paratransit system. That will be conducted by the Maryland Transportation Institute at the University of Maryland. And that will be submitted by July of next year. And then lastly, starting in FY26 and each year after, basically the TTF will have to provide a minimum of roughly $80.5 million to fund the LOTS grants program.
How much, let me just ask, how much has been funded to the lots over the previous year?
So I think I could be a little bit off. I think the most recent year was roughly 108, 110 million. The fiscal note of this bill notes that this is unlikely to impact TTF, the TTF, absent future budget cuts. So generally this meets or LOTS funding is exceeded by this number, so.
Exceeded from the previous years?
It's 80, yes.
We provide more than this to lots.
Oh, so you already provide more, so that's asking that we have at least 80.
Yes.
It's at the minimum.
It's a floor, exactly. And so that's
But I think
basically
it's-
it.
I'm sorry, I have to
Sure,
say.
sure.
I think it's gonna be important for us to talk about the funding that you all give to the lots. $110 million to the lots, which are the local operated transit systems, means that lots get a very small piece to help build out this transit system. So if nothing else, I'm gonna request that we do a presentation on that part of it.
Understood.
Can I ask a question about that too? I
Sure.
think, just from an Anne Arundel County point of view, we would like to know sometimes how the lots are being distributed, because we see a lot of growth in our county, we have a large population in our county, but the allocation is possibly smaller than that goes to other counties, maybe because of past distributions. And we would really like to advocate, of course, for our county to see like, hey, how can we make sure that we can get assistance in growing our service? And I think that's maybe something that can be clarified there too at some time.
So I think at a future meeting, we could have Travis Johnson come in, he's our Office of Local Transit Support Director, and talk about the funding allocation and the formula that we use for the lots. I think we can talk about the formula, but in terms of advocacy, you gotta go to the General Assembly, like, we need a larger pot. And that's really kind of where it comes from, it's, you know, MTA's budget is set and fixed, and the percentage that goes to the lots is continued, you know, we need more for everyone, right? Like, MTA needs more and the lots.
And yeah, so for more information on sort of what took place this session, I would recommend checking out the 90-day report that is available on the MGA website. This link will also, you'll get this link. And we can keep this group posted on any additional you know, major documents that come through out of Annapolis. So I think that covers that. Thank you. Yep.
Sure, Tony, please.
So I'll give more information outside of just the MTA update, and unfortunately, I don't have slides like the MTA folks, and so I'm not as prepared with slides as they are. But I will be sure to share this information. It's gonna be a lot of information I'm gonna give you. I'll be sure to share this information and an update to everyone afterwards. Just for everyone's awareness, for MDOT, our Director of Government Affairs, we've got a Director of Government Affairs, a whole Government Affairs office. We actually tracked 751 bills that were related to transportation. That doesn't include MTA, so that's overall transit-related bills. 245 of those bills actually passed, and so we had a very busy session, and we'll continue to have busy sessions moving forward around transportation. But first, I wanted to give a brief sort of look at what we've been doing in terms of the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and the bills that passed that were related to that. As you all know, there was this Port Act, which is the Protecting Opportunities in Regional Trade Act, which was emergency legislation that was really created to help with the workers and programs for impacted workers and businesses that depend on the port. It also established a scholarship program for families of those who were tragically lost while working on our roads, not just thinking about the ones that were related to the Key Bridge, but any workers that are, you know, tragically struck while on our roads. This is a program, a scholarship program for those family members. The Port Act also just requires the Department of Labor, Commerce to create grants and assistance programs for impacted businesses, and it requires the Department of Labor to develop unemployment assistance programs for impacted workers. Additionally, under the leadership of the governor, MDOT is closely coordinating with MDEM, the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Environment to assist impacted communities and respond to the tragic incident. If you want more information specifically to the relief programs, you can always go to the website that's been set up, which is response.maryland.gov/bridge. Again, that's response.maryland.gov/bridge, and I'll make sure that I can send that information out to everybody as well. Budget, of course, was really big, a really big topic, especially around transportation. but it also included the general fund, and so it wasn't all about transportation, but of course, transportation was a big focus this year during the legislative session. When presented with the 2025 budget, the governor announced a one-year restoration of $150 million in funding to address some critical transportation needs across the state. The funding was really used to restore previously planned operating and capital reductions that we had in the budget, specifically around transportation. So those funding mechanisms included $26 million to fully restore our LOTS program, which we just talked about. There was $28 million in the MTA commuter bus funding to maintain service on our highest ridership routes. $15 million for MTA's critical state of good repair to meet the required funding levels. And that's required under the Transit Safety and Investment Act. There was also $8 million in Mark Brunswick line operating resources so that we can maintain those service frequencies to West Virginia and to launch a new midday service pilot program. There was $52 million that fully restored the highway user revenue program as well. And there was another $10 million to fund the State Highway Administration's mowing and litter removal roadways program. And so the funding really does allow for us to continue to drive the administration's commitment for a more equitable and sustainable transportation system. And thanks to the work of the lawmakers in Annapolis, we also increased transportation revenues by $250 million for fiscal year 2025. The funding is actually expected to increase to around $335 million over the following 3 years. And to get there, there was legislation that was done. That included an increase to vehicle registration fees, and that's based on revised weight standards, with heavier vehicles paying more than lighter vehicles. There was also a $125 surcharge on vehicle registrations for electric vehicles and a $100 surcharge for plug-in hybrids, which is also intended to offset the vehicles that are not paying for motor fuel tax. Starting July 1st, there's going to be a new revenue stream going to the Transportation Trust Fund, and that is through the Transportation Network Company Impact Fee, which is a 75-cent per trip fee that's going to be applied to rideshare services. If the rideshare uses an electric vehicle or plug-in electric vehicle, the fee will instead be 50 cents. And a 50 cents fee will also apply to shared passenger trips. One of the things that we also focused on was, of course, working the work zones and the impacts that we've been seeing, especially with the incident that happened last year. And so there was the Maryland Road Worker Protection Act, which substantially increases fines for drivers who speed through highway construction zones. And so starting June 1st, fines will be doubled from $40 to $80. Starting next year, however, on January 1st, there will be a graduated fine system based on speed and worker presence. And those fines can be as high as $1,000 a vehicle if caught going over more than 40 miles per hour, the speed limit.
Good.
Lawmakers also raised the dealer processing fee from $500 to $800. And while the fee goes to dealers, the Transportation Trust Fund is going to get an additional titling tax from those higher sale prices. Also, the Transportation Trust Fund will get a piece of sale tax revenue from electricity used to charge any electric vehicles moving forward. While I know the commission is focused on transit members may be interested to know that there were no changes to highway user revenues already in law. And so according to law, highway user revenues will actually increase to 20% in fiscal years 2026 and 2027. We also made changes to the Transportation Revenue Infrastructure Needs Commission. This is the train commission that we've been talking a lot about. The commission is now going to be made up of a smaller core group and will have the original membership sort of as a larger advisory committee. The commission's mission remains the same, and that's to explore sustainable long-term revenue sources for transportation and to examine a prioritization process for projects. The commission is scheduled to submit a final report of its findings and recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly by the beginning of next year. And I can tell you they haven't announced the membership to the commission just yet, but that is something that I know the presiding officers and the governor are now working on to make sure that they pull that group together quickly so that we can start the process of the train commission meeting and making those recommendations.
How much smaller? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I can remember correctly, there are two members, one from each from the presiding officers. There are gonna be three members from the House of Delegates and three members from the Senate. The governor has a representative of, well, the Secretary of Transportation and two members of the modes are also gonna be a part of that membership.
It's like 9 or 11-ish.
okay.
Anyone else, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, so it's gonna be a much smaller group that's put together this year. The one thing that I do wanna mention also is WMATA funding. Regarding WMATA funding, the budget includes 150 million to partially offset the FY 25 budget gap that WMATA experienced. It stemmed from factors similar to those experienced by the MTA, which was the pandemic and reduced post-pandemic ridership and increased costs. There was also a deferral of increased jurisdictional subsidies during COVID. And so with the formula, the district provided 200 million, Virginia provided 119 million. And with those investments once they were considered, Maryland's contribution came to about 143 million. The additional resources do help maintain the current service levels, but riders through WMATA will see a 12.5% rate increase moving forward. And in closing, I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to highlight these impacts, but I also appreciate this commission because one of the things that, taking my commission member hat off before I was a member of the commission, one of the things that I really wanted to see from this commission is advocacy for the MTA. And just going through the information that you heard earlier from Holly, and just thinking about the fact of the state of repair and the maintenance issues and all the things that we need to be doing, not to mention the fact that, last administration, didn't move forward quickly with some of the things that we're seeing we really need desperately now. I think this is a really good commission that can be sort of a champion for MTA and the resources that are needed moving forward for the once we get to the General Assembly and legislative session in January. So, you hear everything that's needed. I'm expecting big things from this commission come January to make sure that you are advocating for those things. And so I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have about any of this information. I know it's a lot that I threw at you.
No, it's good. I'd like to keep plowing ahead as best we can, but I want to ask one question, which you may not be able to answer today, but so folks, depending on how close you're following this, at the end of the day, the budget resolution, you've heard the numbers. There was legislative language in the negotiation between the House and the Senate that described the uses to which that new money should be put. And I honestly, the language changed, I think, and I've seen two different versions of it, but it's pretty clear to me that there is an intent for state of good repair at the MTA to be high on that list, if not first on that list. And so we will get to the bottom of exactly what that looks like, but my question for you, if not now, then get back to us is, how do we know, when do we know, how much MTA is going to benefit directly from those new transportation revenues? And I can't quite figure out, I guess, the money's gonna go into TTF. It's obviously gonna come in over time, it's taxes, takes away, and then the secretary in the current system has to figure it out. There's legislative language, which is intent of the legislature, not a strict law. So, I'd like to understand that. And if you're not prepared to do it today, that's perfectly fine. But I think it's a reasonable question for us to say, contextualize all of that for the thing that we're here to deal with, which is MTA resources.
Really quick answer.
Sure, please, yeah.
Quick, short answer. We've got to consolidate the transportation program, which, really dictates what we should be focused on in terms of those construction design dollars moving forward. One of the things that, of course, the Train Commission is going to recommend is how we look at that CTP process moving forward. So I can say today, this year, look at the CTP and that's how we can sort of focus on what that's going to look like. I can't say that at the end of the day, once the train comes up with recommendations and we're looking at the way that we do our process, if that's the way that it's going to go moving forward. CTP, of course, is going to be the thing that we look to, but in terms of how we get to the priorities of all of our different modes, that could change depending on recommendations and what that process looks like for the CTP from Train.
We need to keep on that and put a finer point. And by the way, regarding CTP, again, not for today, but I've asked Dawn to help orient us to work with MTA. Because we have a very distinct role with respect to the CTP and the MTA budget, and we need to figure out, since we're, you know, the CTP arrived just as we were arriving. We all know it was kind of scrambled. We don't want to have that scramble this time. We want as much access, early access to the proposed CTP as it is being put together, so that this commission can advocate for the thing we're supposed to advocate for, which is MTA's piece of that pie. So I'll leave it to others to figure out exactly how and when we will plug into the CTP. Of course, the process is starting, you know, soon, really, because it's a perennial, seemingly perennial process. But we do expect to have a real role in that. And again, as I've said with respect to some other things, not a, you know, here's the CTP, it's done deal, what do you think? And I know that's not gonna happen, but I'm just trying to describe what I would describe as the sort of the avoidable outcome, because we want to avoid that.
So it may be helpful to get a schedule from MDOT of when decisions are made, the final decisions go into the CTP, because I know the jurisdictions have submitted their letters and the whole nine, and the tour is gonna start pretty soon. So maybe if we had the schedule, we'd know strategically when we need to be making.
And integrated into that is a question I asked earlier, which was in view of the new revenues that are coming, how do we know where they're going? So it's all about the budget. And you know, I mean, like, I don't know what percentage of things we've talked about today that end up being all about the budget, but it's a high percentage, right? Because so many of the things that we're facing are not because someone doesn't know how to do what they're doing, it's because they don't have the resources to do it. So it's about the budget, it's about the resources, et cetera. Okay, I'm hoping we can let Tony off the hook and turn to the other stuff, but if anybody has any other questions, please. Okay, so I just want to spend, I don't know how long it's going to take. I hope we can get through this today. This question about the work groups and structure. I want to save a little bit of time at the end, and we don't need a lot, just to give you some more FYI sort of stuff. But on the working groups. So couple of principles here. The perfect will be the enemy of the good. We're trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out with your help, with the staff's help, with MTA's help, an efficient way for this commission to do its job and to engage, educate itself, to make a difference. So I'm trying to figure out how we add the most value. We are not here to micromanage MTA. We're not even here to manage MTA. We're here to provide, to do the things that the statute says that we're supposed to do. And I think we have to make sure we understand MTA well enough to be able to do that. We're, you know, but none of us is going to be as expert. You know, there are some folks here who have a lot of experience as MTA's folks who are day-to-day doing this stuff. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them doing things. So we have to be realistic. And I'm trying to figure out, if you like this analogy, what altitude the commission ought to fly at with respect to all this stuff. And I think it's a bit of a work in progress, right? But so we're going to figure it out together. The reason I proposed these three work groups is because I'm also concerned that we don't slavishly follow the review this plan, review that plan, review this plan, and lose the forest for the trees. The plans are critical, right? In the RTP, these things are absolutely critical, absolutely essential. But at the end of the day, I don't want things to fall between the cracks. And we're trying to zoom out a little bit and say, like, if there were no such thing as all these plans, what are the kinds of things that this commission and our constituents and our stakeholders would be interested in? And therefore, I ended up with these three categories. One is the rider experience, which is everything that relates to the experience of MTA riders, you know, with constraints, recognizing that there are constraints, budget constraints and other limitations. So that's service scheduling, service performance, you know, metrics, marketing, communication, wayfinding, all of the things that relate to, you know, Scott, for example, has asked a number of these questions even today, like, what's it look like from the rider perspective? And it's a very, very broad topic because, you know, riders, like, that's what we do. We provide service to riders. The second is employee retention and recruitment. That's to look at these recruitment and retention issues. You know, a narrower topic, but a critical one in the sense that, and you've heard a little bit about it today, we've returned to it a few times, which is, what's the process? MTA deserves a lot of credit for closing the hiring gap. I think we heard, not that long ago, it seemed like a crisis, that the hiring crisis seems to be maybe abated, but the attendance issues are not, to the extent that that relates directly to things like compensation. Frankly, if they're really, and I haven't looked at the numbers I've been, but if there is really a legitimate compensation issue here, and I assume there is, but I haven't independently verified. At the end of the day, we have a distinct voice with respect to those issues, then does the MTA administrator, who has to work within the MDOT system and within a state system. We're not constrained in some respects in the way that the administrator is constrained to raise these issues. She has to live to some extent, although she does a good job advocating, with certain constraints. We don't. And if we get to the point where we say, look, what's holding the system back are these issues that relate to employee recruitment, retention, and it's not just operators, because I think as we dig into this, we'll find, and we heard about this before as well, that at the program planning and development, you've heard about this cycle of outsourcing. Why are we outsourcing? Well, we don't have enough people in-house to do the work. Why don't we have enough people in-house to do the work? In part because the pay scale doesn't permit us to hire experts at that level, so we outsource. So there are issues there that need to be unpacked. And I think, I've talked about advocacy and accountability as being two things that we really want to do here. I think, to me, it's about testing for accountability, making sure that we think MTA is behaving reasonably and is being accountable. But once we get to that point, then we have to advocate, and that's our job. And we can do that differently than the MTA administrator can, arguably than anybody can, who is a state employee in the MDOT system. So that's second bucket. The third bucket is about project and program delivery. This has come up a little bit. Simone asked earlier about some of these questions. There's a little bit of personnel perhaps in there as well, but what are the means by which we are planning projects? What do the timeframes look like? I suspect we're not going to change the schedule for delivery of rail cars on the planet Earth, but I think we need to understand that, and we need to figure out if there is anything that can be done, if the commission can have an impact on any of those issues. It potentially invokes the whole issue of procurement. How do we procure? Why do we procure that way? What's the role? Where does MTA fit in that? I think that MTA is burdened in certain ways by the procurement process and the Board of Public Works process and other processes that some other entities of the state are burdened by and some are not. Why are we in column A and not in column B? So all those kinds of things. That was where I ended up with the help of staff and thinking through. Sorry, I want to hear from you more than you should hear from me about this, but I'm just trying to outline what I think. And then we do have to figure out, and then Don's email explains after that, sort of these other specific things, and you've got a sense today of fulfilling the specific statutory charge which will work in, some of which will overlap to some extent, because, for example, review of service changes is a statutory specific item. It arguably is part of the rider experience, so it'll be crossovers, big Venn diagram, and that's just the way it is. So let me open the floor to hear some feedback on this. But before I get to the substance, let me just talk about the process. We're not, like I said, we're not trying to turn ourselves into MTA's micromanagers or managers. It's not our job, and it would never work. Right, so we have to figure out how to interact. And my working thought is that BMC is the staff to this commission. BMC, fortunately, is very facile with transportation issues. It's not as though they're just some random group. We have a lot of expertise. So my intent would be that if we go forward with this approach, we would have BMC staff these groups. The groups and BMC would figure out what the right questions are, certainly, to the extent that answers are readily available, and some have already been supplied. For example, MTA has given us a lot of data on employee data, retention, and so on and so on. And then we would figure out where MTA needs to engage. The answer is not everywhere and certainly not nowhere, right? I mean, MTA is essential in this. We're not gonna go work in some vacuum and then say to MTA, here's what we think, and we're gonna send a letter or put do a report that says this is our conclusion. That's one extreme, it's a bad and ridiculous extreme. But I also understand that the commission has to do this work and engage MTA at the appropriate waypoints to say, tentative conclusion, what do you think? We need some more data, can you supply it? And we'll all have to kind of feel our way through that because no one's done this before. So that's my view of both the substance and the process. We can certainly tweak it as it goes along. It does not need to be, fixed in stone, but we got to start somewhere, and that's where I propose we start. Okay, now the floor is open. So please, let me hear from you guys. Does that mean you think it's a good idea? Some affirmation would be welcome too.
So.
Yeah, please, yeah.
I think it sounds good that we have the subcommittees, but as I look back at the functions that we're required to do, where we're required to review and comment on certain different reports, I think that has to be a part of the schedule that we have. So we have time to read these reports and understand these reports and see which subcommittees have to report out on these reports so that we can comment on the reports. So I think that the committees, the work groups are good, but I think we need to incorporate our responsibility associated with these reports and when they come out and when we're required to give our comments back on this and try to integrate the two to make sure we're doing what we were asked to do as a commission.
Okay, I have something I want to keep, I'll put a pin in that. Keep going, others? If others? Yeah,
Just Aaron, please, just the project program and delivery box, that's a pretty big one. I think one thing that's kind of missing here is funding formula, funding. Looking at, kind of how to coordinate or advocate for funding piece. Now, I don't know if that should be in the project program or delivery. I think that's a different bucket. So maybe consider a fourth one where we really look at funding formulas, funding strategies that we're gonna need to look at, not only just from a state perspective, but from a regional local governance perspective, as we look to kind of build out the system we want to envision. And that itself is, I think, gonna be
I agree.
I would point out that the project and program delivery will be looking at the RTP, will be looking at the CNI. So, I mean, they would be the ones focusing on those and helping the commission develop a better understanding.
Let me respond to both of those, which are both obviously excellent points. The other thing I'll sort of preview, we're adding meetings to this calendar. We're gonna meet once a month on the first Friday, except I think there's maybe one exception in July, because I think that's the July 4th Friday. We're also, we'll get this out to you, we're moving the September meeting from late to early to the normal time. I don't know why it was late. I don't know for sure if we're gonna use every one of those meeting dates. It's possible we won't. For example, maybe there won't be a December meeting. I don't know yet, but I wanna get them on your calendars. We are statutorily required to meet 4 times a year, which is way not enough. I think the right rhythm may be every other month eventually, but we're in this ramp up period where we're all trying to get our feet on the ground. So we're gonna add these dates. I say that in part in terms of the work plan. Aaron, I think we need groups to sort of focus on something to become more or less the ones who take the deepest dive, if you will. To be honest, I was thinking that funding is so overarching that it wouldn't necessarily end up in a work group, but would be something that the sort of overall commission would reserve. Because what I'm not trying to devolve the entire work of the commission into these 3 work groups or 5 work groups or 7 work groups or whatever. I was just trying to think of the subject areas that seem to be relevant, where people really can, might be interested and willing to dig in, and then help to basically organize and pre-digest to some extent for their fellow commissioners, a discussion around those topics. So funding is job one in a lot of ways. And it will insinuate itself to some extent into these groups because it just does, because it's all about resources. But anyway, that's just so you have some sense, and same for you, Andrea, just trying to figure out how to, you know, I'm not sure where everything fits in this big puzzle, but we're trying to come up with a reasonable infrastructure here that will allow us to organize the work. And it can certainly be adjusted, Art.
How do we wanna put those working groups together, meaning like how big are they, how many people who will be part of it? How is that?
Yeah. Well, the staff and I is assuming that the commission is okay with this structure, we're gonna ask you for your interest, and then we're gonna do the best we can to put people where they think they would be, either their skills are best suited or their passion is best suited. I'd rather have people working on the things that are of personal interest to them and the people may have. So we gotta figure that out. We will right away.
Has MTA staff been asked? And my reason is, I don't, you know, conceptually, I don't disagree with any of the groups, but I'm curious, kind of MTA staffs, when this commission was created, what were they hoping to get insight, input, perspective from this kind of body from? So I'm just curious if it's been vetted, if there's any other thoughts from MTA staff.
I'm not gonna defer to Tony here, he and I talked quite a bit about the commission and goals. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, it's, these are all potential work groups, right? I think we need to look at, you know, especially what the commission is laid out to do and try to figure out like the best way to get to that. It may be work groups, it may be presentations, it may be tours, it could be a number of things on how we put this all together. Just a couple of red flags for me, just in general, is just looking at the amount of meetings you already have and the fact that this is all volunteers. I know you all have good hearts, but I also want to, you know, just be respectful of your time. And, you know, maybe it's work groups, maybe it's virtually, I don't know, but just a red flag to put out there. The other thing about this is just thinking about like, especially when I see employee retention and recruitment, and I start thinking about contracts and labor and union. It's a sticky subject for me. And so, you know, the way that you lay it out, I would just be really careful about what you want to look at and how much you want to get into it. Labor negotiations, it just is what it is.
Which I'm in the middle of right now.
Right. And so I'm just trying to, you know, one, be respectful of your time, but also thinking about, you know, MTA and your needs as well, and where we all want to go as a commission. What is the best way to get there? And then, you know, we probably need to talk a little bit more about, you know, what is being asked of each of the sort of work groups, and maybe we have recommendations on those work groups or other things that, you know, we can always come back and talk to the commission about, because I honestly have not had you know, a final sort of, this is what I think about this work group, that work group, but the other. And so I was interested in really hearing what others had to say about them as well. But I of course had some red flags.
Yeah, if I can echo Tony, I mean, I think similarly, the union one in particular is a concern, right? Like, you know, we mentioned absenteeism. We have to negotiate a leave policy with our union, right? Like that is a negotiated thing, and so just gotta be careful with how much influence, you know, outside comes into that. Similarly, I guess my suggestion would be, you know, we're adding all these meetings, is perhaps we could do report outs on some of these topics at these commission meetings versus work groups, and then determine if we need work groups from there. But I think further discussion, and I think one of the other things that I'd like to just understand and the group have more discussion on is, again, what is the end goal, right? Like, what are we all working towards? I know there was discussion previously of transit authority, that discussion still continues to be out there, but I think that helps to determine where the work groups should go, or if there is our work groups, just given like what the commission as a whole is trying to achieve. And I apologize if you bring it up.
No, I was just gonna, I asked that question first because my follow-up was, my only other thought was kind of positing the question of, because we are in the ramp up, everyone has, you know, referenced, do we wait a bit longer and form ad hoc groups that are very specific as opposed to standing work groups. As we're standing up the entire commission, do we really even know what standing committees are versus perhaps in the first year, you know, you do more ad hoc as specific, you know, topics are just gonna pop.
And if I can add, Holly, I agree with your thought around presentations on these topics. To better inform those that may not be familiar with the inner workings of them at MTA. And since assets were something that sparked a lot of dialogue earlier, that pops in mind for me. We all know across the state with regard to aging assets, right? We're dealing with a lot of that in the city with a lot of our fleet, including our fire boats and the like. And so assets popped up for me as a critical matter that we should be having discussion points on. It's not here, but doesn't mean it cannot be. I think that'd be helpful as we move forward.
Yeah, we're familiar with your aging assets. We're familiar with your aging assets.
Yeah.
It's a good partnership area.
Other comments? Okay, so we will take all this into account and sort of figure out what we might want to do with Andrew, your new role. I'll participate in that discussion. So we'll figure it out. I'm very satisfied with the curve of the ramp up so far, but I wanna keep us on that curve. We also have a December 1st report due statutorily, and I want that report to say more than we met and we learned a lot. I'm sure everybody feels the same way. So, you know, that's part of the thinking here about, you know, what we're trying to get done. And I'm gonna ask everybody, if I can, to think about, and we'll send this out afterwards, because I do wanna have a little time at the next meeting on the discussion, that zoom out discussion, which is what really are we trying to get to here? So I think now we've had enough of these meetings that people are like, all right, I'm starting to get a feel for this, right? And now it's a question of what can we do? And frankly, a little bit of triage about what we, you know, this is my altitude question, which is just, you know, what's reasonable for us? Where can we invest and add value? Where frankly, is it the sort of thing where it's just gonna be frustrating for everybody, right? So we have to figure all that out. So I just need to cover a few things in the remaining few minutes, and it'll only take a few, I promise. Commission resources or information items are listed next. Couple of things, and Don can pitch in as he sees fit. You've been invited on tours of MTA facilities in groups. I think we've had some, but not everybody has responded. Please respond. I strongly encourage you to participate in that. There are 3 different days, as you know, chance to get out and see the facilities, to see other employees, all the good things you can imagine. So please respond to that and we'll remind you. Second, you have the bylaws that have been sent out in draft. There's nothing particularly earth-shattering. If there's really nothing like that in the bylaws, it is mostly a reflection of the statutory charge as well as some ordinary bylaws-y stuff, which most of you have served on things and have seen. Gotten a few small comments from folks, really on form, not substance, word choices, and so on. So what I think we're gonna do is to give you a date. Actually, I think we'll just make it easy. We'll just say that at the June meeting, we'll discuss any changes you might have, ask you to send them in advance once again. At the June meeting, let's expect to ratify a set of bylaws, which hopefully won't have any meaningful changes, but we can talk about them. If you have questions or concerns, that's fine. We will get you information on sort of we talked about having kind of a portal for the commission where documents of interest can be posted, so you don't have to poke around the universe for them. That portal is now, Don's showing it to you, we'll send this to you. It is not intended, it's nothing secret about it, of course, it's a resource website for the commission. It's not intended to be public facing, only because it's intended to just provide resources. So it's documents we've gathered, legislative things from the last session, just to put them in a place and to organize them according to these tabs. Which Don, you can just kind of quickly summarize what the.
And this is a prototype, so we're still working out bugs, but Would love to get, we'll send you the link and would love to get your feedback on this. It's, the homepage has got links to the other pages, but you can scroll through the menu at the top here. What the commission is, some variety of studies and plans, links to those on these buttons. Our meetings, link to our materials. Legislative documents, Ken was talking about the 90-day report that's here. So if you click on that, it brings you to the 90-day report. All these are linked to various documents. These are commission documents. We have the orientation manual that you've seen, and the draft bylaws are up there. A little bit about the BMC, some of the tool. This is sort of the fun page where you can look at various resources from the outside. This is CNT's website on walk score. And our clips that we send out, we have posted up here so far. So for you to use as a resource.
Yeah, so we'll just take your feedback. That's sort of a click around, and if you have questions or think anything should be added, if you have something that's your favorite piece that you think, this would be great to get up there for the benefit of the other commissioners, you let Don know, we're gonna post them.
Welcome that.
So that's that. There's an item called Y Transit handout, which we will talk about again at the next meeting, but you may remember that we discussed the fact that we all have internalized probably why transit's a good thing, but it's not always easy to articulate it to other people for some folks. And so you can think of it as the elevator speech on why transit is good. There are lots of ways to think of it, but and there's lots of material out there from MTA itself, from various advocacy organizations. We thought it would be useful for there to be sort of a BRTC branded, for lack of a better word, why transit piece that we could use both to crystallize our own thinking and to use from time to time in our own advocacy when we're meeting with decision makers and others. So this piece is intended to achieve that. There is a more complicated version than I guess what we call a plain language version, along with a data sheet behind it, which is the second page. It's in your packets, and I think it was sent to you as well. We will put it on the agenda for the next meeting and remind you that your feedback is welcome. Again, easy to change and update, but we should at least arrive at like sort of version 1.0 of this thing, so that we can start to deploy it and use it and share it with people in the sort of broader advocacy and transit affinity community. And the last thing I have is I have in my hand here a bunch of charm cards. They are some of you are regular transit riders, some of you are not. And if you are not, I'm offering you this charm card as an incentive to ride transit. It's got $10 on it, which will get you, someplace. It's obviously and back. It's obviously refillable. So I would ask everybody will just pass them around. Maybe I'll just leave them with you, Don or Shaft, and if you'd like one, please take one, but the condition is that you should really use it to spend some time on the transit system in one way or another. So think of it as just a little incentive and reminder. Just a regular $10 charm card. It doesn't entitle you to a lifetime of free rides or anything like that, but hopefully it gets you going.
We do have one more. We have two speakers that have asked to address the commission.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's my fault. So anyway, those are my things. Just to get you through the end, let me turn it back to Don for that topic and anything else that he'd like to convey.
We do have an obligation to hear from the public, and we do have two speakers that would like to address the commission. One is in the room, Eric. Both. Okay, great. Both are in the room. So why don't you come on up to the podium?
while they're coming up, I'm gonna run immediately after, my bus is in 13 minutes. So apologize if I don't say bye to everyone.
Thank you, Molly. Thanks for good afternoon, everyone. I'll be quick because I know I'm standing between you all and lunch, which I feel like Don did on purpose. Maybe it makes it a little more intimidating. My name is Eric Norton. I'm the Director of Policy and Programs with the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. Transportation Alliance is also part of the Transform Maryland Transportation Coalition, which is a larger statewide coalition. And just first of all, I wanted to thank you all and applaud you all for the work you're doing. It's really impressive. Like as advocates, we spend lots of time and energy asking MTA for information and asking for meetings and briefings, and it takes a lot of work and time to do that, and they're not obligated to do that. Obviously, the administrator is very open and welcoming to us and does give us that information often. But having a group like this around to do that, and the amount of information in just like 3 meetings you've been able to generate and get out into the open and the public is really impressive, and has been needed for a long time. So just like, thank you for the time and energy and work you're putting into this. It's going, we're noticing it, and I think it's already making a little impact, and I think it's only gonna get better. And like one example of that is just in going down to Annapolis, advocates would often go down and testify at MTA's budget hearings. And we were usually the only people down there, it would be maybe me or somebody else from the Transportation Alliance, and a couple riders would come down and testify. And this past session, BRTC chair comes down and testifies, and it just makes that much of a difference when somebody wearing an official hat, like from this group, comes down and testifies, and it's not just seen as like, oh, that's a rabble-rousing advocate. So I think that makes a big difference, and it was really welcome to see down there. So thank you for doing all that. And then along with that, I wanted to see if I could pass these out and encourage you to consider, as you're doing your work, to keep in mind the idea of a full regional authority. I think we all know, like, the genesis of this group was when then Delegate Bridges introduced a bill to look at the creation, study the creation of an actual full regional authority model. And it's, it sort of went through the sausage making process and came out as sort of the compromise was the creation of a Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, which is more advisory in nature. And frankly, I think as advocates who supported the original bill, we were kind of disappointed and thought like, oh, we're just getting this advisory commission. But as I was just saying, like, it's been pretty impressive so far. But we think a full authority is still something that should be considered, and maybe this group should sort of work towards, because thinking about the things you heard today, things like the light rail vehicle replacement and why that was able to kind of slide under the radar, and those decisions are made right now because there's no public, or until now anyway, there was no public accountability. It was essentially an administrator would notice like, oh, these light rail cars are getting old, we should replace these. Says that to an MDOT secretary, who says that to a governor, and they're like, oh, I've got these other things I want to do instead. And the riders don't know that. We don't know the vehicles are getting old and need to be replaced. We don't know things called midlife overhauls and useful life. Like those terms are foreign to riders, but they have an impact now, and they're showing up now. And now we're stuck with this situation where we're going to have 7, 8 more years of, half the cars are being serviced at any given time. So we think, reforming the governance model can solve, structurally issues like that, so that they won't happen in the future. So just want you to consider that. Thank you for your time very much. Anna?
Hi, I'll be quick. My name is Anna Ellis. I'm also a member of the Transform Maryland Transportation Coalition, but I'm speaking today for myself as a rider of the system. And I am a lifelong rider of the Baltimore transit system. So I also wanted to thank the commission. I mean, Eric really covered all the things that I wanted to say about that. But one thing I wanted to suggest is that the commission members sign up for the e-alerts that the MTA offers especially for light rail and subway service, because these alerts are for problems like a disabled train or a power outage or something along those lines that are going to cause either single tracking or a bus bridge to be put in place. these alerts won't tell you when a scheduled train is not gonna make its run or if it's gonna be late, but it will give you an idea of how often these disruptions occur. So I can send Don the email, the URL for signing up for these alerts. You might find them very informative. The other thing is I take the light rail, I usually ride at least a couple times a week, and I take it to the Orioles games. Well, now that the team is good, there's a lot more people going to Camden Yards. And I'm gonna take the light rail, which is a good thing, but there's a shortage of functioning light rail cars. And so on every trip I've taken to Camden Yards this year, every train has been one car, which means that the trains are packed and often leaving other riders on the platforms. So this actually is a direct result of this decision many years ago to kind of postpone the overhaul of the light rail cars. So, and now the trains are going to be replaced, but that's going to take 5 to 7 years. So my hope is that this commission will not allow these kinds of mistakes to recur. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Anybody have any other questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, maybe one remark also to this last speaker, sorry I forgot your name. No, I just want to tag along to your comment and the document that we have with White Transit. My perception at first impression of the White Transit is that's a good document, especially the first page. The second page is very transit oriented. If you say like we go like to from 10 to 7 minute frequencies, maybe politicians don't really get the difference, So I think it would be better to translate the benefits to 7 minute frequencies or the expansion of the light rail in the document. We can reach X more jobs, X more people, X more concrete results. What we did with Anne Arundel County was we got people talking about it that didn't get service and that did get service. And we were able to get like doubling the transit commitment for the county. And I think we also have our line now on ridership that's 1.5 times at the highest level before COVID, thanks to this. And I think that's maybe one step that we can address next time.
Yeah, that's all the kind of feedback we want on the White Transit piece. So that's a good start. Okay, anything else? Okay, if nothing else, motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We're adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. I have your charm card, those of you who are